Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to start with a hybrid statement. The meeting of the WSESD on the evening of September 24th will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public bodies meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location, where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physically location as posted in the notice of any agenda. If anyone is having problems online connecting, please contact someone in the space by email, via text, and we will do our best to connect you. Nevertheless, the meeting will continue as scheduled. Just be aware on the agenda, if appropriate, agenda items are subject to potential action. Regarding the consent agenda, if any board member feels that an item on the consent agenda warrants discussion, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be set aside for discussion. In this way, the consent agenda will be approved in one motion. That request should be made now or before the vote on the consent agenda. Somehow I'm hearing an echo.
Yes.
That's what you're trying to fix.
Oh, got it, okay. Amendments to the agenda. There are a few. We are going to end the evening with an executive session with potential action inviting in Mark Spino and Hannah Parker. That agenda item for the record is 1 VSA 313A7, the academic records or suspension or discipline of students. The second amendment, of course, with board approval. On the agenda, under board matters, I would like to move F and G. F is impact of cell phones at BUHS and other school sites, and G is student advisory committee in relation to other student groups at BUHS. I would like to move that to October 8th to provide a bit more room in terms of time. We have a busy agenda and an unexpected executive session. So, do I have board approval to do that? Does anyone object to that? I don't think we need to bring it to a motion. Okay, all right, so we will do that. The next amendment is the wording of Roman numeral 5, letter A, admin report letter A. And the wording is perhaps unclear. It says right now, principal reports regarding proposals to reduce budget by 2% by school site. This issue refers to comments at previous meetings regarding potential contingency plans by school site to create a 2% freeze that would adjust the FY25 budget only if necessary. So that's what that reference is to. I just want to clean up the wording on that. And there is a fourth amendment that has come to my notice. Thank you, Mark. And on October 8th in Springfield, Vermont, there will be a regional meeting of supervisory unions to meet with Zoe Sanders, the Secretary of the Agency of Education. This is designed to be an opportunity for her to share her vision and receive feedback. That will be on the agenda under new business because we need to talk about board representatives who will attend that meeting. And it coincides with our next board meeting. I certainly advise that we move forward with business as usual on October 8th in terms of a board meeting, but that we can discuss fully under new business. Okay. We are now up to student matters. If there are any students present or online who would like to offer comment, now is your time. Hi, Thea. Thea, would you identify yourself nice and loudly and your town, please?
I'm Thea. I'm from Putney. I'm one of our student reps. I just wanted to say that I think this year has gotten off to a great start from a student perspective, and I think the leadership is great, and I'm really excited for this year. So,
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any other students, either in the space or online, who would like to speak? I don't see any hands, so once again, are there any students who would like to address the board? All right, I am going to move on then to public comment on non-agenda items. This is a time for the board to listen and to take notes. It is not a time for the board to respond to comments or to engage in dialogue with the public. If appropriate, the board and administration will work on next steps. I do have an additional comment. A statement in the minutes of May 14, 2024 affirmed that this section is reserved for the public only. Board members and administrators will not be called on at this time. This is a protective time for community members. This message became muddied on the occasion of the September 10 board meeting. That inconsistency will not occur again. We are now focused on public comment on non-agenda items.
I have a comment, whether it's my turn.
Oh, absolutely. If you would identify yourself by name and by town.
I'm Thomas Ehrenberg, and I live in Putney. I know many of you, some from many years ago. So I was not at the last board meeting, but I was encouraged to look at the video, and I have a reaction to it that I wanted to just put out there. My comments are not about they're not about freedom of speech or about civics curriculums or fairness to both sides. My comments are not about optics or about who gets to decide curriculum. I want to comment about racism and the ways in which racism as an embedded part of our culture can sometimes creep around the edges in ways that sometimes we're not necessarily always aware of. There was a quote in the paper just a couple of days ago where the presidential candidate identified these Haitians that are coming from who knows where and are raping and killing our children and our girls, and how terrible it is, and how he's going to fix that. That's not a direct quote, but it's pretty close. And I think that probably nobody who either knows his history or knows anything about American history will doubt that Haitian immigrants in that sentence is code for black men. That's the history of race in America. I want to comment about it because I think that as I listened to last week's, or the last board meeting, it got very confused. And I got confused. So, if you live in a culture where racism is an embedded part of the culture, as it is in America and has been throughout America's history, you can't avoid it. You can try to, but mostly you're better off addressing it. And I think that any child of color who is exposed to political candidates who espouse explicitly racist viewpoints, which many do, are inevitably going to be impacted by that. So my comment isn't about curriculum, and it's not about optics, it's about how we treat our children. And about the thoughtfulness that we need to put into every move we make and how it affects kids, whether they're of any marginalized group, how it affects how they're going to see it and how they're going to take it in. What was distressing is that I think we got lost in the weeds of a principled conversation where we lost sight, and I include myself readily, even though I wasn't here, where we lost sight of the impact on kids when they see a poster of someone who has explicitly attacked them because of their race. And there is no way that any child of color in the United States could not be aware that when President Trump, former President Trump, made those comments, that he was talking about him, that little boy. There's no way he could not know that. Now, I'm not, I am a believer that it's up to white people to deal with their own racism. I don't think that it's up to black people to educate us. That's just my own feeling about it, and that's why I'm here tonight. I think that you don't post a poster like that unless you're willing, unless you're willing to talk about the real issues. If you're willing to talk about the racism and the sexism and the misogyny, by all means, put it up there and let's have those conversations. I applaud that, I welcome it. But to just treat it as though it were an ordinary political whatever, no. That misses a real educational opportunity. So, again, those comments apply not only to young black children seeing that, but to all kinds of marginalized groups who are also daily being attacked, sometimes in their own schools, but more importantly in this context, in the media and by candidates. I think that's an important conversation to have. I welcome having that conversation. That's a true civics lesson. And if you want to have a real civics lesson, be willing to talk about that stuff. Be willing to talk about a rapist who's running for president, a racist who's running for president. That's an important conversation. How does that happen in the United States? That's a great conversation to have. I understand there are children coming to class whose parents may support Trump. That's fine. They can participate in that conversation. But have it be an honest conversation. Not a whitewash, conversation about it's just a political contest. So, I've had a lot more comments, but there are a lot of people here. I'm gonna shut up.
Thank you.
That's my 2 cents for it.
Okay. The next hand up is Michael Sostek, online. Michael?
Hi, thank you. I sent out a letter only a few hours ago to everyone on the board of my comments because I figured I wouldn't have time to make them all, and I'm going to cut short what I wrote to all of you, and just for brevity purposes, and just talk about or read the last few paragraphs of my letter. But again, like the prior speaker, I'm commenting on the same board meeting and what was said. It is a sad truth that safety for most people in our world is threatened. Today, here in our own country, we see that threat showing up in the vitriol expressed in political discourse and even attempted assassinations of a current politician. For those with loved ones that might be caught up in the threatened, unprecedented, massive roundup and deportation of immigrants, it is scary to say the least. Some of our political figures are perpetuating this fear in multiple ways. It is the right of all of us, regardless of our role, whether it be school administrator, board member, teacher, staff member, parent, or community member, to help ensure our students' physical and emotional safety. We must question the use of any symbol or banner, especially when it is prominently displayed, that is threatening to any of our students, staff, or community members. No student or staff member should be walking into a school with a sense of fear or exclusion. And for that, we are all responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Jody had her hand up next, and I'm going around. Yes.
First of all, I have a question.
Can you identify yourself?
Jody Normandeau Dummerston. I have a question. Can leadership councils be addressed under this, or should they be addressed under one of the other issues? I don't see them listed.
So I'm going to say this is public comment on non-agenda items. The Leadership Council is on here. It is Leadership Council updates, letter B. So I don't know whether this is an update or.
This is not an update.
Then I would suggest that this is your time.
Okay. First of all, I agree with both of the people who have spoken before, wholeheartedly. I was one that was part of the meeting, the board meeting. I went to the Leadership Council and spoke. I did not make the second Leadership Council. I was away and could not make it, and I'm sorry I wasn't there. I think a lot of harm has been done to a lot of people. The school, the principal, the BIPOC people in our area, Ellen, who I happen to know is an excellent teacher, and I don't think if she thought at all that this was harmful to anybody, I don't think she would have done what she did, and I hate to have her demonized because I don't think she should be.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Probably best that we not refer to people by name, and not by
The teacher in charge
suggest.
of this
Okay.
project. And I hate to see this. I was not at the last meeting, but I was brought up to date on it. And the meeting started out, and this whole thing started out with the flags. And then it went to curriculum. And then it went to something else. And I understand that it ended up with the harm to the community. I mean, it didn't stay focused on what the main issue is the harm to the people of color or the people of Jewish faith, the people of whatever. It didn't stay put. And I know that this particular teacher is pretty good about keeping things fair and open conversation. And I hate to see any of this. It's just blown clear out of the sky, which is too bad. And it's too bad to have Dummerston on the front page of the Reformer a couple of times, and I know that the writer was there at that last meeting. And it just seems to be continued, and I'll bet it continues tonight with certain people. And this is not the Dummerston that I've known since I moved to Dummerston in 1970. This is not the only thing I can compare the Leadership Council is to our PTA. It's not like the PTAs used to be. Nobody was against anybody. Nobody was trying to make a name for themselves. It's just a real shame that this has happened to our school and town. So I may speak later on. I've had my say at the other meetings. I just know all these people who are involved, and I don't think anybody intentionally meant to hurt people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, the woman on the very end, did you have your hand up?
Yes.
Okay, so please identify yourself by name.
My name is Martha Noyce, and I am a resident of Brattleboro. I'm also a newly retired school teacher with a career of close to 40 years. I have taught in Vermont, New Hampshire, South Carolina, for a bit in Japan. I taught in private school, public school, and an inner city school. So I feel I have a really well-rounded view of what I'm about to read. I'm here this evening to again bring focus to the school budgets. I ask all of you to have multi-leveled conversations. Superintendent Mr. Spino with the principals with your classroom teachers, board members to the various committees, and board members to all those who voted and elected you to this very important position. Conversations about ways to cut back, compromise, consolidate, and be creative. When tightening a budget, whether it be your own family budget or your school budget, these are questions that you ask. And yes, there may be sacrifices and the response of a firm no. What conversations are you having? Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to alert everyone that this is public comment on non-agenda items. And just note under board matters, there is a section devoted to Dummerston Leadership Council concerns. I just want to make note of that. Sir, would you identify yourself and your town, please?
Spoon Agave from Brattleboro, and my life has been fairly well steeped in education. I'm well educated. My father was a teacher. I was on the Brattleboro School Board. And for me, it's just quite simply the fact that we're here today underscores the fact that when you bring politics into a school or any public place, it's an incendiary topic because by definition, politics are pretty inflammatory and ever more so in this particular day and age. And I just think that needs to not be, I mean, by coincidence, a few minutes before I was leaving this evening, Molly Burke came and knocked on my door. And I asked her, you know, would they allow political pictures or signs or anything in the State House? She said, oh, no. And I think the same is true in the Brattleboro Municipal Center, in the library, in the hospital, which is not public, but more or less nonprofit. But any place where people are expect to be treated equally and to bring politics, specific politics of candidates into that is can only lead to a lot of conflict that we see here.
Okay, thank you. Laura, please identify yourself by name and your town.
Laura Chapman, Putney. I have two comments, one for REACH-ER2 from the NAACP and one for myself. Can I do both? They're both very brief. Okay. So on behalf of REACH-ER2 from the NAACP, dear school board, we, the NAACP of Windham County, would like to extend our appreciation to the Windham Southeast District Board for their swift response to our concerns over the public display of political campaign flags at the Dummerston Elementary Library. The impact that they were having on our local community of color was brought to us by families of color themselves who wished to remain anonymous over safety concerns, who saw the flags from the road. Your efficacy in resolving this issue will not go unnoticed to us or to those families. In solidarity with families of color in Windham County, REACH-ER2, President of the Windham County NAACP. And then my comment is on behalf of myself. It's more in the form of two suggestions. One being that I think there should be a consideration of policy going forward that matches the Secretary of State's policy requiring that any state employee or political candidate request board permission before putting political candidates' flags on site, on school site. I think that that should be extended to school employees as well, or any public member. And the second is I'm going to suggest that there is a policy created around the recording of subcommittees. I'm concerned about things that I'm hearing coming out of subcommittees, and it's hard to know whether or not those things are reality if I can't go back and watch a recording. I think in this day and age of Zoom, where every subcommittee is using Zoom, they should be able to record, and I know it's a requirement of the board, so it does seem like it should extend to subcommittees, including leadership councils. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, yes.
Thank you. I'll stand.
Can you identify
Yes.
yourself?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Mary Gannon. I'm probably the only non-Vermonter here in the room. So I live in Winchester, New Hampshire, but I have worked in this district and this community. I've known many of the faces here since 2003 around the work of diversity, equity, anti-racism. I've been doing that for a long time in the state of Vermont for probably over 25 years. Primarily in schools with leadership, teachers, kids, school board members. I also have a PhD in social justice education, so I've been thinking about and studying this body of work for a long time. And I want to be clear that I am also a vice president for the NAACP branch here in Windham County, but I am not speaking in that role tonight. I'm speaking as somebody who cares about this community, who also has worked here and has tried effortlessly with many of you to try and change the culture in the school. So I'm going to read and say a couple things. So I've been doing a lot of work and thinking about researching like what's been happening around this particular situation. And I know a lot has been said and a lot has been written about the display of political flags at the school, at the Dummerston School. I believe that we may be having the wrong discussion. So I think that a lot has been argued and debated on the intention or the legality or the curricular implications of this issue. But what I feel like we need to be talking about and considering and sitting with is the impact of a decision that was made on those who are most impacted when their sense of safety is compromised. And how the decisions that will get made going forward will also impact those who are most, how that will impact those who are most impacted. I think we all know that what we want to do is center, in this context, the children. But I also feel like the folks who have expressed discontent, fear, safety, some of whom are sitting in this room, I would also say that there are several Black women in this community who have expressed an issue around their own safety. And we need to understand that one of the things that's happening in the state is that when Black women talk about their experiences of being in positions of leadership and power and authority, they are silenced. So I want us, again, to be thinking about who we need to be centering and who we need to be listening to. One of the things that I worked on with this district, with Michaela Sims, and many others in years gone by in David schools, is that there's been this ongoing social justice and anti-racism commitment. And so I went back and looked at that because I thought it would be interesting to think about what is it that is like the guidepost for this district, and what are some of the ways that this district, because it has a stated commitment to equity, anti-racism, inclusion, diversity, belonging, all the words that we use to describe this, what are some of the ways that that commitment is being upheld? So I'm going to read to you a couple of the quotes from that. And again, thinking about where the responsibility lies in this district, in the district leadership, and also with the school board, to make sure that the commitment statement is being operationalized. So the first one was, that I thought was, provide social justice awareness and anti-racism training to all staff on at least an annual basis. That's one of the parts of the commitment. Another one is create space and provide the resources necessary for teachers to do the internal work of becoming critically conscious, reflective anti-racist practitioners equipped to shift mindsets. And another one that I thought was important is about accountability. How do we hold ourselves accountable to at least annually taking an organizational inventory of how well we're doing in terms of meeting the above commitments? So I raised that up because this district has been working on DEIJ, belonging, inclusion for a very long time. There are many leaders in this community, within the district, and parents and other community members who have been working around this body of work and trying to change how we talk about this, how we are reflexive in our practice, and how we are also understanding the ways in which our privilege sometimes, because of where we're situated as white people or with other forms of privilege, actually impacts how we really understand this. So one of the questions I want to leave you with tonight is, as you think about where you are positioned in this, around the various range of identities that you bring, I'm asking you to think about, as a district school leader, as a teacher, as a staff member, that when members of the community who identify as people of color, as BIPOC folks, and they're stating that they feel unsafe and concerned because of the presence of the flags, as one of these examples, what does it mean for us as privileged individuals to believe them? Because I think one of the things that happens is that we can't believe that people who are sharing those experiences with us are actually telling us the truth. It couldn't possibly be happening here. And that's a little bit of the narrative I hear sometimes in this community and other places in Vermont. This could never happen in Vermont, and it's happening in Vermont every day. So another question that I want to leave you with is, how is the district leadership and the school board ensuring that this commitment, which is on the website, how are you all that are in positions of power making sure that this commitment is being implemented, funded, and operationalized? Because I do believe that some of what is happening right now in this conversation in the school, with the principal, with teachers who are trying to do the right thing, are looking for support around how to do this better. And then the last thing I will say is, we cannot heal what we don't feel. And I wish I could take credit for that, but Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative quote that's one of his quotes. We cannot heal what we don't feel. So for those of us who benefit from the many privileges we receive, it takes effort and it takes intentionality. It takes humility to pause and consider the harmful impact on others that our behaviors and actions might be taken, even if that is not our intention. I've been hearing a lot about it's not the intention, it's not the intention. We have to understand and wrestle with the impact. We all are responsible for this and accountable to the children and all people in this community, especially as people who carry privilege and are in positions of power and influence. I want to invite you on Friday night at Keene State College. Dr. Bettina Love is speaking. New Hampshire Educators of Color are sponsoring this event. She's an incredible scholar, educator, and researcher on the impact of racism in schools, particularly for girls of color. If you have more interest, you can get in touch with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. If there are no other comments, definitely, and then I think we should move on to the next agenda item. So, I'm sorry, yes, your name?
My name is Cheryl Sprague, and I'm a resident of Putney. I was born and raised in Brattleboro and spent many years away from Vermont in my adult life. While residing in upstate New York, I served for 5 years on the Burnt Hills Ballston Lake Board of Education. I was one of the founding members of the Upstate New York Coalition for Democracy, which was formed to monitor activities of the radical religious right and their impact on public education. So that would provide you with some context as to my political leanings. I am, as a former board member, concerned with the activities and behaviors of some of the current board members. And this is with regard to the hanging of the flags. As an elected Board of Ed official, your role is to create and set policy. The role of administrators, including the superintendent of schools and building principals, are to implement those policies. I believe Julianne Egan provided an appropriate explanation for the decision to have both flags remaining as visuals in supporting the lessons of the upcoming presidential elections. Ellen Rago is an outstanding teacher. My grandchild, who is a current high school freshman, had Ellen as a middle school humanities teacher last year. Ellen strives to provide thoughtful, balanced discussions in her classes. We need excellent teachers like Ellen. Far too many teachers left the field since COVID, and we need to be encouraging those positive teachers. So my concern is with the way this has come about. And I don't think that it was handled appropriately. I don't think that many people tried to hold democratic discussions with this. I think that, like I said, the board's role is to set policy, not implement it. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you. Online right now, Lynn Barnes, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Lynn Barnes. I'm in Waitsfield, Vermont, and I am not in your community. However, I did read the article, and I also have friends who have been impacted by the flags that were displayed. And in my mind, people have come forward to express that they were harmed by this. And it's important that we listen and believe people when they say they're harmed. And in my opinion, taking down the flags would be a very easy way to help the community feel safer, and rather than escalating it to this point. So I wanted to thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Continuing, and I do want to move on. Liz Adams, would you identify yourself? I just did, and your town.
Liz Adams from Putney. Unfortunately, I missed the beginning of the last meeting. I was outside planting seeds and just lost track of time. But I think something that would have made the issue more crystal clear to people is that if we had 3 parties running for president, and one of those parties was the neo-Nazi party, with a swastika on its campaign banner, would that have been allowed to hang in the school window? I think that example would catch up even more people in our communities. And I think that makes it crystal clear why these campaign paraphernalia, I have never heard or seen it being used in a school in our district. My kids were taught civics at PCS My grandchild was here for the 2016 election, and yes, they taught civics. One of our teachers taught a great civics lesson off in the woods. I think, John, you told the board that story, but I think that there wasn't enough thought put into those flags and how they could negatively affect the community. Because I'm pretty sure if there was a neo-Nazi flag, it wouldn't have been allowed up at that school or any of our schools. And yes, I can agree, we need a policy. However, when it comes to student safety, that is in the board's purview.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. I am going to move on to board matters, which is listed as Dummerston Leadership Council requires evaluation of protocols and procedures as they relate to, and it continues with 3 points. Communication between board chair and superintendent. The second point, public comment on non-agenda items at the 9/10/24 board meeting. And the third point, potential violations of open meeting law, code of ethics. I am going to, before we open it up to that level of discussion, I just want to guarantee to make sure that we have polite civil discourse. I recommend that all comments be directed to the board chair. And once again, I'm going to ask that we refrain from naming individuals, that we remain focused on the essential issue. It is always advisable to add to the conversation and avoid repeating what has already been said. But that is not meant to control or limit anyone's comments in this discussion. And as we continue, I'm going to ask that, because I don't know how many people are going to speak, that we limit our comments to 2 minutes, which is standard procedure. All right, I'm going to open with a short statement. My concern has always been for the safety of everyone in that building, students and adults. This has never been about curriculum, never about the use of banners as a teaching tool, never about the removal of said banners. Those issues are out of my lane as an elected board director. My focus was and is on the safety of our students. On September 5, I responded by following protocol. A board member communicates directly with the board chair, and the board chair communicates directly with the superintendent. For me, as an elected board member and the current board chair, to have acted in any other way would have been a dereliction of my duty. My primary responsibility is to always work to ensure the safety of students in the entire district. I responded appropriately. The Dummerston Leadership Council has presented concerns in a letter that I have already shared with the board and with the superintendent. I have also requested that this letter be printed in its entirety, along with the cover email in the minutes. The documents are as follows. The cover email reads, "Hello, Deborah. Thank you for this information." That's a reference to an email I wrote about timing this meeting. "Thank you for this information and your ongoing commitment to policy and procedure. Attached, you will find a letter representing a consensus of the Dummerston Leadership Council for the board's consideration. The DLC, Dummerston Leadership Council, will not represent the letter at the WSESD board meeting and understands it will be public when the board so chooses to take it up for discussion. With appreciation, Michelle. Well, this is the moment that the board is taking it up for discussion. It is on the agenda. And the letter is short and to the point, and it reads as follows. The Dummerston Leadership Council believes that all parties involved regarding the topic of the political flags hung in the windows of Dummerston School had good intentions and were acting based on what they thought was best for the students in our school. However, we feel that policy and procedure are important in ensuring equity and democratic process. As such, we met to examine WSESD school board policies, code of ethics, school district policies, and open meeting law as they pertain to the actions of the WSESD school board and the discussion held under the topic of public comment at the September 10th WSESD board meeting regarding a political flag display at Dummerston School. We determined that there is evidence of policy and procedure violations, and that the violations caused harm to the Dummerston School community, students, families, and staff. We would like the board to complete a similar examination internally and create a plan of accountability and to restore trust. This will allow us to move forward together to continue the important work on behalf of our students and our school. That's the conclusion of the letter. Although violations are referenced in the letter, policies, code of ethics, and open meeting law, the expression of concerns is so extraordinarily broad that I am in doubt about how to address these unnamed violations. It's not often, but I am truly speechless. If anyone has a motion, please hold it until after the discussion is concluded by me. I will have a motion at that time. The floor is now open for discussion. Okay, I am seeing the first comment here, and it is online, Lana Dever. Lana?
Good evening, Lana Dever, Brattleboro. Thank you very much, Board Chair. I took a moment to write down my thoughts because I didn't want to lose anything. So bear with me, it is short. I want to say that I have known the educator in question for many years, and I know them to be a fellow community member and parent. I want to reiterate that this is not about individual members of our community. This is an issue of safety that affects us all. And we have to listen to some of the wonderful words that have been said already about how this is intersectional. I am exhausted when I hear us constantly referring to simply people of color and not forgetting that these issues affect all of the marginalized communities. So I have heard I have heard both personally and otherwise this language that is directed at marginalized individuals, and especially women of color, when they are in positions of power and leadership. It is frankly quite exhausting. I have never heard open meeting violation more times in my life than when I served on the school board. I never hear it when a white man speaks. Isn't that funny? And I want to make no mistake right now that if we had a transgender member of our community who's on the school board or any other person who is in a marginalized community, what you will hear is the dog whistle word of open meeting violation. and I want to remind us all what the actual rules and laws are. Please refer to the WSESD website and look at them for yourself. Please do not take my word for it. I follow the laws. They are there in print. Carry on. And again, this is not about individual members. I respect and love every single member of our community, many of whom sit at that table. And thank you, school board, all of you, for doing this, for bringing this conversation, and for being unafraid to allow us to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Yes.
Okay.
Can't follow
Mark.
Yeah.
Mark Spino.
I think Michaela wanted to follow.
I might follow.
Yeah. I'm going to be brief. I just first start by saying I appreciate all of the comments that were shared tonight. I think it's important that we have hard discussions and learn from each other, first and foremost. The thing that I would like to focus on is children are exposed to current events. They're exposed to different news channels, social media, things their peers say, things their families talk about at the dining room table or in other areas. And students and children are also very curious and have questions about why things are happening and why somebody said something so outlandish. I believe it is our role to help our children and students become critical thinkers, to teach them what is currently happening, so that they can learn to make decisions for themselves and for what they believe in. I also believe we need to give the educators, our educators, the grace to do this work on a day in and day out basis. It's not easy. And it's not easy when there's misunderstandings, when there's conflict or disagreements. But at the end of the day, disagreements, conflict, misunderstanding is normal. We're human beings, it's going to happen. But in our schools, we need to focus on developing communities where children and adults feel safe to ask these questions that they are curious about and to have the discussions with each other. So that's my point. Things happen, things are going to continue to happen. Kids see things, they have questions, they're curious, they bring them to school. And moving forward, I think we have this, but I think moving forward after the last couple of weeks is finding the grace to support our educators in helping our students navigate a very complex world.
So I will
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
So I will add to that. I'm Michaela. Do I have to identify myself?
Please.
I'm Michaela. I live in Brattleboro. I just think that we have very few opportunities to really model in our community disagreement, and how we do it really matters. How we conduct ourselves really matters, and that is an excellent opportunity for us to show students how it's done. That we don't always have to see eye to eye, but that we're willing to engage and show up for the conversation. As an educator, and especially one that focuses on equity, I feel like it's not just our job to show the world as it exists, but to give tools to analyze that world. And also to give the impetus to children and for ourselves as well, to change it, to make it better. So it's not just to look at it as it is, it's to analyze it and to see, what are we gonna do? And I think that part of that is really digging deep into civics and what's happening in our world. But what I would say in addition to that is that we need to see all candidates represented, I would say, and I know people still agree, that all the candidates should be up there with equal signage so that we can see Dr. Cornell West, we can see Stein, we can see all the people who are there and ask questions about how do we get to this moment in history. As this conversation continues, I just want to highlight that in addition to our small corner of the world, that it is very easy for us to attract national attention. And with that national attention comes more danger, especially for people who are in marginalized groups. The more we engage in a level of discourse that's minutia, the more dangerous it could be. And I don't want any of our board members who have already been named to be the focus of any national campaigns. And this has happened in our state before. People have had to move. People have had to change jobs. People have resigned from their positions of leadership. And I have to say that I know people are here to support the children, that we're all here for the same purpose. And my hope that going forward, that this conversation could take another form and not become a focus that might make more of our communities in direct danger from attention that's outside of our purview and control.
Thank you, Nancy, would you identify yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Nancy Weiss, and I'm the director of the Windham Regional Career Center. Sorry, I'm Nancy Weiss, and I'm the director of the Windham Regional Career Center. I would just like to add to what Michaela said, because I think it was incredibly graceful. And that is, we want to teach our students how to engage in civil discourse and understand that we do not all agree. I will fully admit that I think we are living in a very potentially dangerous time within our own country. I think that's sad, and I think it's appalling. But when we refuse to examine our own behavior and reflect on that and self-reflect on that as a learning experience, either as a board or a district or a group of teachers or a group of students, we are not modeling our very best for our children. I would encourage the board to take the time to follow the advice of the Dummerston Leadership Council and examine the level of conversation that occurred at the last meeting. In that, I believe we can learn from the experience. I frankly want my own children to live in a world where civil discourse can occur and where it can occur safely. And as a member of a group that is often invisible as far as disabilities go, I will say to you that there are often political candidates that step way beyond anything I would ever imagine being tactful, courteous, or appropriate. That does not give me the right to talk about school, shooting up a school. It does not give me the right to instill fear into community members. It does not give me the right to say ugly, ugly things about any member of my community, no matter who they are. We cannot afford to do this. We need to be models for our children. And I would simply ask everyone to remember that as adults, we have the right to have civilized conversation. We do not have the right to operate from anger or from or to degenerate into conversations that lead to further fear. I would simply ask that we each take the time to examine what part of this we own. Thank you.
Christina.
Christina Newman, Dummerston. I just want to, I heard from directors from the board chair, and I did it without a name, I heard from the board chair that the issue of concern was flags being displayed in the window, not flags displayed. And I heard from the board chair it was a safety issue. I'm a resident of Dummerston. One of the most politically active people in town, and if you live in Dummerston, you know just who I'm talking about, removed her signs in 2008. Oh, weren't those the kinder, gentler times when 2008, remember that, when it was, discourse was actually much kinder and gentler. Somebody shot a BB gun at her house over her political sign. And she no longer puts political signs in her front yard, on the same road that our school is on. I had the privilege of serving as chair of the Dummerston board and of the WSESD. And I would tell you that when I would drive home at night, I would drive past the school to make sure it was safe. Somebody keeps leaving the light on downstairs. I can't shake myself. I don't go by there, but if you could just make sure the lights are turned off, that would be great, by the way, a little parenthetical comment. But I still drive by the school to make sure it's safe, because when you read that statute that gives the board the authority for the safety of all their students, it really sticks in your gut, and it's really hard to remove it. So I just think that that is what I'm hearing the board chair saying she was responding to. And I did not hear her say that she was interested in engaging this whole other conversation, which is fascinating, and your comments have meant very much to me. But in terms of the concerns of the Dummerston Leadership Council, it was specifically, to my understanding, I have missed some of the story of her direction to move the flags from the window to another location. And it was on the basis of safety. So however that played out, I would have shared that concern in my seat as well. I'd also like to comment on open meeting law. I have concerns that some of the leadership councils have not been following open meeting law. I did a personal tour when I was chair of the board to go to each and every leadership council to explain their compliance. Act 133 has removed or not, has changed some of the compliance, but an agenda should adequately reflect what's going to be on the agenda, and the minutes must be posted within 5 days. And in the spirit of saying that nobody's perfect, as one of my favorite Dummerston teachers used to always say, my minutes in March of 2024 were delayed. And I apologize to the community. I am not perfect either, but I would query the board as part of this, as maybe open meeting law seems to be misinterpreted, leadership committees are not clear on it, and that might be some of where the concern is coming from, but people do not understand. So maybe there could be some resources devoted to helping people brush up on where they need to, what they need to be doing.
Thank you, Christine. Ruby, would you identify yourself?
Yes, Ruby Matthew Putney, board member. And what I've heard over these past meetings, to me, the issue that I'd like to center on is around how do we as a district, how do we as a board, how do we as a community hold space for individuals who have concerns. And the reason I'd like to center on that is as I was processing with community members through what we read in the paper and what people experienced in meetings, that's what kept on coming up as a question of how, if someone passed the flags on the road in Dummerston, and they felt harm, but they don't have a kid in the school, how do they raise that appropriately? And when I look at the policies, which I do believe will be, considered at the Policy and Amendment Committee, it's very difficult to create a policy that will get every single, you're gonna hit all the things, it's hard. And so we don't have a perfect system right now. So I think we could take the experience we just had and analyze, and think about. And I think this is what the Dummerston Leadership Council to some degree is asking for the board to do. We could consider, how do we hold space? How do we allow for our community to engage around these, a concern. And I think if we're not doing that, then it's then we're doing a disservice to our community and to our kids and to our teachers, and so I think that I believe we should be centering on that. I also very much think that as has been cited by other folks, I do think that we can acknowledge that there's lots of harm that is felt in this. There are teachers who feel harmed because they were shocked by comments. There are people driving on the road who feel harmed by what they see in the window. That we can acknowledge harm and we don't have to get stuck in it. I feel like we're getting a little bit stuck. And so I would love to see the work of this that we're focusing on now move to the policy and amendment committee, because I do think there are actual policies that are relevant to this conversation.
Thank you. Jody?
Jody Dunstan. Ruby just brought something to my mind and that has bothered me, and that's policy. But the school, what I have found, the school has a certain policy that parents do. If a parent has a problem with a teacher, the first thing they do is go to the teacher, and then if that doesn't work, blah, 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 blah. The board has a policy that board members, if they have a question, they go to the board chair, and the board chair goes to the superintendent. So I don't think people realize that. And then Ruby mentioned the community. I didn't know who I was supposed to go to. I'm not a parent anymore. With kids in school. I'm not even, my grandkids aren't in school anymore. But I am a community member. So I went to Julianne because I knew Julianne. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I didn't know who the teacher would be that I'm supposed to go to. So I think you have to take those into considerations when you're talking about policies, both on the school level and the board level and the community level. I don't know if I should go to Deborah or to Mark or to the teacher or to Julianne. Keep that in mind.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you. All right. I'm going to move on. I reached out to Pietro Lynn, the attorney for our district, our expert in open meeting law and education law. I realized that my statement read at the beginning of public comment on non-agenda items at the September 10 board meeting was not consistent with the spirit of open meeting law. Although the statement had not been placed on the agenda, the intent was to establish context and timeframes. No action was planned, no action was taken. In all other respects, my actions and my words have been determined to be compliant with open meeting law. No violations of open meeting law. No violations of the Code of Ethical Conduct. No violations of district policies. Strong feelings have been expressed on both sides of this issue. Thank you to everyone. I would like to move forward at this point. Let's refocus on our shared mandate, the well-being, the safety, the education of children and young adults. Is there a motion for the superintendent to look into this matter and report back to the board, as well as take any action as may be necessary to resolve this issue. Is there a motion?
So made.
Okay, it's been seconded. That motion is open for discussion. I'm going to go to a board member first, okay? Sean Murphy.
Yeah, you referred to an issue. Could you clarify what that is?
Exactly what we've been talking about in the broad scope.
Yeah, but I'd be much more comfortable if it had specificity to it. Because issue, I mean, I think we all here in this room know what we're talking about, but, you know,
okay,
there are a lot of
so,
people there in the room.
so then, where the word issue comes up, as well as take any action as may be necessary to resolve this issue. The complexity of this communication, the complexity of the strong feelings that have been expressed. And I could reference remarks made by various individuals in this room. I can't define it more than that. Mark, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna, when you presented that, you chose the word sides. And I would just say, I don't think there are sides to this topic. I think there are misunderstandings and perspectives that vary. I do not think there are sides. And I also think that we put a lot of energy into this topic, which is good. We've had very good discussions. It's been great to hear different perspectives. I also think we need to move forward. I'm not sure what you're asking me to do, honestly, but I do feel like we have done our due diligence. We have had these discussions. We have provided space for everybody to share. I think tonight's been very respectful, and I appreciate all that has been shared and how it's been shared. And I think it's time for us to move forward and to turn the page.
Just as a point of information, I shared this motion with you several days ago, as well as even today.
It didn't really strike me until I heard you say it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the reality of communication, that it sort of sits with us for a period of time, and yeah. Ruby.
I believe, I'm of the opinion that that as we move forward, it's not, I don't believe it's the role of the superintendent to act in the way that's been moved. I really do believe that this work lives in evaluating our policies, and therefore it's more appropriately in the work of the Policy and Amendment Committee, which frankly I do believe that the superintendent is part of that, as well as board members and community members. So to that end, although I understand the spirit of the motion, I would speak against this particular motion for that reason.
And as a point of information to this entire group, the Policy and Amendment Committee, and I am the chair of that committee, is meeting tomorrow in the central office at 2 o'clock from 2 to 4. And we will start with the policy on restraint and seclusion, and we have invited guests coming. It's a continuation of a discussion from 2 weeks ago. And we will move to the policy on multilingual learners. Sorry, that's a moment for me. I don't have the agenda in front of me. And again, we have invited guests. And on the agenda, we're going to take a pause, and we are going to consider so many of the policies that have been referenced this evening. And some of these policies we have just reviewed and brought for readoption, but perhaps they're not clearly worded, and we need to go back over it and look at it. So these points of this evening are well taken. Tim.
The Policy and Amendments Committee reviews policies, makes amendments to them. The superintendent, in my understanding, is responsible for seeing that these policies are implemented well in the spirit and letter of the policy. There have been a couple of policies that people have expressed confusion over. That, in my understanding, is partly what you're asking for in the motion, for the superintendent to clarify policies and to speak to whether the district is really fulfilling those policies to the letter and spirit.
In the spirit of the motion, I think there's merit. I certainly will do this, and in revisiting this recording, and not just looking at the minutes, but revisiting the recording, hearing what individuals have said. I have heard the issue of professional development and how we engage in discourse and how we make space for all of these voices in a safe way, and how we acknowledge the spirit and the words of individuals in this community, and that they are not dismissed. I think that is the spirit of the motion, to take the complexity of what has been said this evening and consider it in terms of this entire district, including policies. Yes, Laura. Mm-hmm.
In regards to communication, as it's come up throughout this meeting and the last one, and in regards to the superintendent's responsibilities and community, I'm curious if it can be examined whether or not there's a possibility for putting something on the website or creating an open way for community to give feedback to the school in a schools, the whole system, in a de-identified way. Because often what happens, I appreciate that within schools, you're supposed to go through the teacher and the principal, and I've sat on a school board, I've been a parent. That's not always something that's comfortable for parents. In fact, often for people that are marginalized, and people that aren't marginalized, it can be very uncomfortable. There's a power dynamic. You know, teachers hold power in the classroom, and I have an enormous amount of respect for teachers. I appreciate them, and they're charged with our children every day, and so there can be complexity there for parents in giving feedback. And then for community members, we have no idea where to go when it comes to another school in our community that we're not involved in directly. So having an open space on the website that allows for people to send a message, whether identified or de-identified, they can make that choice, may have brought back feedback before you ever even heard it. So before I ever even heard it. And I know that's a little off subject, but I feel like it's in there in what you're talking about.
And my understanding of the role of the board in contrast with administration, that's the domain of administration. For sure. I just want to acknowledge, I am a 35-year veteran teacher from middle school through high school. I have a deep appreciation for teachers. I have a deep appreciation for administrators. This environment represents our hope for the future. We are entrusted with the care of children, and I do value that. And that's why, after having recently retired from the trenches, I have returned to this world. I can't step away. I don't want to grade any more essays. Thank you very much. But I can't stay away. I value this work. Kim.
My concern with the motion, and I understand the spirit of it, it seems just openly vague with what we're asking the superintendent to do. And that we can come back later and say, oh, you know, well, we wanted this done as well with that. But we haven't really said what we wanted him to do in the first place.
Does, well, this is open to consideration of amending the motion, amending it, pushing it forward. Or if the board so determines, dismissing the motion altogether. Ruby.
In hearing what we've been talking about, I'm reflecting back on something I heard in the Dummerston Leadership Council's letter, which I believe, although I don't quote me on it because it's not in front of me, but I believe it kind of implored the board to be self-reflective. And so, you know, I understand the desire to, that, you know, we as a board we want our superintendent to guide our school, guide the work of our district, make sure that policies are enacted. But I think that we as a board have work that we could do around, you know, and this is true all the time, how are we doing? You know, and we've talked for a while about we as a board can do that self-evaluative work. We get caught up in our work. And sometimes we really have to, you know, center ourselves back at that. So this is an opportunity to do that. And so I would want that to be the focus if we, you know, if rather than a motion that charges our superintendent to do the work that has been identified here. I think it's on the board, and I think it's on, you know, and as I said before, in policy, but also I think we could be doing the work that's self-evaluative.
Brian.
So with that in mind, I'm wondering, would it be in order to suggest a friendly amendment along the lines of, instead of directing Mark to do this work, to direct the Policy and Amendment Committee to look at, I'm not sure exactly which policies, but maybe specifically D11, public complaints about personnel, as a starter, with regard to the conversation that we've had as it has been generated by the citing the flags on the Dummerston school.
Thank you. So there's a friendly amendment to the motion for the Policy and Amendment Committee to look into this matter and report back to the board. and look at the relevant policies, because it's definitely more than one in there. And I've just listed a few of them on the agenda. Many of them are already listed on the agenda for tomorrow's meeting. Yes,
And if I could say to that point of many of them, I'm not sure which ones, but to Ruby's point, if we're going to look at what we're doing, our ethics might be something there as well. Or, again, I don't know which ones, but there are other amendments that,
well, I think it's
that might pertain to the board as opposed to how people address the board or address concerns.
Mary, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, if it's okay. Just to go back to the policy, I was thinking of that quote. The quote reads, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," but I was thinking I was thinking about this idea of culture eats policy for breakfast. And what I want to say is to think again about, policies. I do a lot of board development work around policies with school boards. And policies can be these powerful tools, but the culture and the people who are responsible for implementing them and operationalizing them and holding people accountable for them are really what often keeps them from being successful. So I just felt like it was important to put that into the conversation, because people love policies, right? But the fact is, if we're not really doing something with them because they are actually in many ways making sure that the people who are most impacted by the lack of a policy are not getting what they need, if we don't figure out how to hold people accountable in those. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
One of the policies is the Leadership Council policy itself. The administration is responsible for orienting the chairs of the Leadership Councils and what their role is, what the role of the Leadership Council is vis-a-vis the board and the school. That's why I support the motion, because I think we need clarification from the superintendent on what the very reason and purpose of leadership councils are.
Christina?
So I almost feel like there's two issues here. One is the request of the Dummerston Leadership Council to look into open meeting law violations, to have the board do that. And code of ethics. And I believe I heard you quoting Pedro Lynn that he had reviewed this. And I think that that deserves a response, that deserves some board discussion, because that was the specific LC request. I think this is a really good discussion as I looked at policies and looked at other districts' policies. We could make it easier for people to understand chains of command. There's a lot of work to be done, but I think that's a separate, that's the growth piece, but I think that there's a nuts and bolts piece that the board should consider addressing as well, which was the specific request, which I heard you address, but I think having a board discussion about that or have some sort of response to the Leadership Council might be helpful.
Matt?
Point of order, could I get some clarity on the current friendly amended motion? What I have written right now is a motion to ask the Policy and Amendment Committee to address the issue raised by the Dummerston Leadership Council, as well as make recommendations to the board as needed. Is that the motion?
Would you read that back again, please?
Of course. Motion to ask the Policy and Amendment Committee to address the issue raised by the Dummerston Leadership Council, as well as make recommendations to the board as needed.
I'm going to refer this back to Brian. How does that sound to you?
It's acceptable.
It's acceptable. Okay, so the recommendation, I'm just going to read this back. The recommendation is for the Policy and Amendment Committee to address the issues raised by the Dummerston Leadership Council, as well as make recommendations to the board as needed. Okay. Jim?
Can we have a vote on the friendly amendment?
And the friendly amendment is the new reading of the policy, of the,
Let me just say this, that I'm opposed to the friendly amendment because I think that it puts the Policy and Amendment Committee in a position to go beyond its purview.
Yes, Sean, thank you.
I would kind of concur with what Mark has said, and that is that we have to move on. And I think that the motion initially was in good faith to try to resolve what is being brought up here tonight. But it's too complicated, so if this happens or with a friendly amendment, I'm going to vote against it. It's not because I'm against the motion, but I'm against the process, which has gotten too complicated. I think it puts too much work already on our very, very busy superintendent. So I would hope that we table this motion and move on and do it after everybody's contemplated. I agree with Mark, it's time to move on.
Okay, so does moving on mean that that the feeling is on board level that we don't need a motion at all? That we do the work of the board, we do the work of B2 and B3, I believe. I think that's the goal setting evaluation of the board, that we do the work of the Policy and Amendment Committee, and that we do the work of ensuring implementation of policies. Which is the work that we do. Which is the work that we do, essentially. Isn't that correct? So, is that the will of the board? That's my question. Matt Shivlin.
Point of order, when a motion has been made and we have a friendly amendment to that, and what feels like a statement from a board member to table said friendly amended motion, does that require a vote of the board to do so on multiple levels?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's multi-layered at this point. Yes. Okay. So, we have a motion. We have a friendly amendment to the motion. And the friendly amendment to the motion, is there a motion for the, if I do remember correctly, for the Policy and Amendment Committee to look into this matter and report back to the board? Right. So at this point, we vote on that friendly amendment. All right. I'm trying to frame it. Is there a motion, so how does the board say on the friendly amendment? That is there a motion for the Policy and Amendment Committee to look into this matter and report back to the board? To address the issues raised as well as make recommendation to the board as needed. To address issues raised by the Delaware Student Leadership Council, as well as make recommendations to the board as needed. Is that the friendly amendment?
I believe so, Madam Chair, and I believe you are looking for a second for that motion.
I am looking for a second for that motion. And I do not hear a second for that motion. So that motion is
The friendly amendment is failed.
the friendly amendment. Thank you for the language. The friendly amendment has failed. Thank you very much. Thank you. So now we are back to the original motion.
Yes.
The unfriendly motion.
Okay, goodness, okay. This is the language of this kind of work. This is the language of this kind of work, yes, and,
Madam Chair,
yes.
point of order.
yes.
Making a motion to table the discussion
Thank you.
keeps the motion available to us, but it doesn't eliminate it, but we are not going to vote on it tonight.
Got it.
It requires the majority of the board to table that discussion until another time. And I'm looking right at Robert's Rules of Order.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anne. Okay, so there is a motion to table this discussion.
Second.
We've got a second. All right, and, discussion? Okay, we're going to bring that to a vote. All those in favor of the motion to table, this discussion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please indicate by saying no.
No.
Okay, it's a roll call vote. Okay. Motion to table the discussion. I'm gonna go down the line. Ann Beekman.
Aye.
Okay, Tim.
No.
Ruby.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
Eva.
I recuse myself.
Okay, so you are abstaining. Okay, Kim.
Aye.
Ryan. Colleen is Colleen online? Okay. Matt.
Aye.
Okay, and I've chosen to vote myself. I'm going to abstain. Okay, so the majority has it to table the motion. All right. Table motion, table discussion. Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. Yes.
Excuse me. I'm wondering if the board has a mechanism for the kind of self-examination, self-reflection that Ruby was talking about. We want, as our superintendent said, we want our kids to be thoughtful and to think about these issues. We want our teachers to be aware of them and figure out ways to help kids with them. It seems that the board, that process could start with the board. And I'm wondering if you have a process for, apart from policy, which gets eaten by culture, for breakfast. But if you have a policy for, these are tough issues. These are very, very indebted, deep, tough issues. And how does the board talk to each other about it? And how do you talk with your administrators? I don't know if you have a mechanism for that.
The mechanism that I'm aware of is a policy. And I believe it is B2. I believe it is B2. So I think as a board, we need to take a good look at that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We are moving on in terms of the agenda. Before we do move on, I think we need to take a 10-minute stretch break. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this discussion. Thank you. And move through the rest of this agenda. Before you, are you recording?
Yes.
Oh, I see, okay, never mind. What I was gonna say next. We are at letter B. Any updates from leadership councils?
Is this where we can talk about them?
Oh, yes. Yes, of course, yes.
First of all, I want to say that over the past several years, I've seen what the Leadership Council in Darmstadt has done, and they've been amazing. But there are a couple of issues that I would like to take up with the Leadership Councils, and I will agree with Laura here that asked that they be recorded And the reason is because I think when people, I guess, work in the dark, which isn't really in the dark, but without having a recording these days, because we're so used to everybody from the legislature on down of having their recordings, that you get a chance to go back and see things in, whether they were in the same light or a different light. Because one of the things that I found with our Dunstan Leadership Council is the minutes don't get on in a proper way. And I'm waiting for the minutes, number one. And number two, minutes never really say what really happens in a meeting. I don't care who you are. I went to the Leadership Council, the meetings two times ago. And I was really rather upset with the tenor of the meeting. And wished that it had been recorded so that I could go back and see, you know, if I still felt the same way. But the tenor was kind of an us versus you guys. So that kind of upset me. And I wasn't able to, I'm not able to go to their meetings because I always have something on Thursday nights. So I'm not able to go and just read the minutes. And I enjoyed when I was able to go. But the last meeting, I had several people tell me it was brutal. Now, I don't know exactly what happened or whatever because it's not recorded. You can't find out. But they told me it was brutal. So I would just suggest that they are a kind of an arm. You make the leadership councils as a board, and they're kind of an arm. I would like to suggest that they be recorded.
Yeah, I think that it depends upon, my understanding is we are the only district in the state that has leadership councils.
Well, you can.
Yeah, I think that is the case. We were at a meeting in Burlington and we asked the Secretary of State. It came up, I think Ann, you were there as well. It drew a blank about just what kind of an entity we are. And in terms of recent legislation having to do with which bodies are recorded and which are not, leadership councils did not fall into that category. I do believe that there is new legislation coming up. I have not looked at it yet, as of January 1. And it deserves scrutiny. Actually seeking the advice of our lawyer, and just how we fit into that. Carolyn, did you want to say something?
When considering that option, please also think about some of the practicalities. Right now, we don't have a Zoom that our school can use. We're using our own computers, our own Zoom capacity. And I think if there's going to be a requirement, there ought to be some support for it.
Yes, absolutely. Just as the same way there is for subcommittees. We do use our own equipment for the subcommittees, but we do use the WSCSU Zoom capability. Yeah, so thank you. I think that's a point well taken. Any update? So I'd like to not continue this conversation because the legality of it. Tim.
Yeah, I just want to say that BAMS had a very good leadership council meeting a few weeks ago. It was very good. They talked about how to increase parent participation. It was inspiring to hear from Keith about what a good start the school has been, reinforcing what Thea said about the high school. Things like, it seems like people are off to a good start. But one thing that we talked about, which I advise other leadership councils to follow, some time ago there's a Panorama family survey which generated over 500 comments. And Matt Shibley disaggregated those into positive comments and suggestions for growth. We reviewed those comments at the Leadership Council, and it's a good exercise to do. I would encourage other leadership councils to discuss the results of the family survey. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have an update.
Eva Nolan.
For early education services. So they completed the Birch Street, the Birch playground. There was a renovation and that was completed. I attended a meeting back in the summer where it was educators, administrators, and one of the topics had been about how do we invite more BIPOC families to Head Start. They have a BIPOC playgroup that's been really successful, and they've been promoting it on Facebook. And one of the things that's really impressive is that with their funding, I mean, they're so creative on how they fund and make sure that all of the services and all of the extras for Head Start, for instance, lunches are included and breakfast is included. And they have 2 people who are cooking everything for all these little ones. I mean, it's amazing. And the other thing about that's happening there is that, you know, we have our teachers here, but their pay rate is different, and it has not kept up to what the teacher pay is, and it's incrementally, but it's big. I mean, 2%, 3%. They're getting closer and closer to the wages of teachers. And one other thing to consider is that they don't get summers off. And that's something that a lot of people don't think about. They work all year round and they don't get summers off. So that's an ongoing conversation. And it's been a joy being at the meetings.
Thank you. I'd like to just make a comment. I don't recall if I did as the meeting began, but it is a pleasure to be in this setting. It is beautiful. And I would like to thank Putney Central School community for hosting us. I would like to thank the Putney Central School Leadership Council for for just the graciousness of refreshments, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. Can we come back? Yeah, thank you.
We should have every meeting here.
Well, this room is gracious, which is not to say that we are not excited to go to other schools. We are going to Dummerston next in 2 weeks. And this is, I was going to talk about, the next item is, well, can I move on to the next item?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. But I'm sort of bridging between this item and the next item. I just want to say, yes, go ahead.
I'll be quick. And it actually stays in the world of Putney Central School. So I am on the Putney Central School Leadership Council. Kim was unable to be at some of the most recent meetings, so I'm just reporting that since our last meeting, the Putney Leadership Council had 2 meetings that I think were really, one of which I think was very successful. It was a community engagement event led by John Sessions around what's going on at Putney Central School. And so the idea for that was that it was at the library, the public library. It was an invitation to community members, not just to caregivers. And it was really helping to guide what are the values of our school and how are they reflected in the work that's happening in the walls. And John did a really wonderful job at presenting a series of slides and conversation. A lot of that was centered on the climate data and brought those things forward. So I really applaud the Leadership Council and John for the work in terms of that engagement, and encourage other communities to consider that. And it was very strategically timed because John is beginning the process of budgeting, at the local level. And so this is his attempt to get the word out, kind of catch people if they have interests, invite them to come engage with him, so that the work that he's doing to develop the budget and then bring it back to the Leadership Council before it is presented to the superintendent and then to the board and then to the community. So it was very timely, and I would just encourage other leadership councils to consider something similar.
Okay, thank you. Any other updates from leadership councils? Yes, Mark.
Yeah, just a general update in regards to the fall orientation for leadership council board chairs and reps. We have a survey that has gone out offering the evening of October 15th or 16th. October 16th is in the lead right now, but we need more responses. So just this afternoon, the survey was released for a second time. But at this point, I would say pencil in October 16th as the orientation. If that changes, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Did we decide that board members could be invited to that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Good.
great.
Can I just share, just as an FYI, October 16th is also one of the college planning presentations at the high school that evening, so I just don't know if there's any of you as parents that would be impacted by that.
Okay.
And the schedule is already getting packed. Yes, okay. I'm going to move on to board subcommittees. And I just want to say something as the chair of the Policy and Amendment Committee. The Dummerston School put out a notice, and I got it at 12:03 today. And it's an all calls bulletin asking drivers or other volunteers that need to be fingerprinted, that they need to get to the central office and get their paperwork together and get on the books for fingerprinting so that they can drive our students to off-site school-sponsored events. And this is in keeping with D7. And I don't know if you remember, but we went around and around and around with D7, fine-tuning it. And we put it out there, and then we had to take it back because it had a date in there, I think a February date, and that had to be expanded out because we were beyond February. So again, this is, I guess this is just acknowledging this notice that went out from Dummerston. And if you are on the books for being fingerprinted, you actually have an appointment. You can drive students to off-site school events while waiting to be fingerprinted, okay, in terms of the reading of the policy. But also for people who have already been fingerprinted, you don't need to be fingerprinted again, but you do need to go through the,
background check.
you need to go through the background check. So just, Dummerston takes the lead on so many of these issues, and I certainly have reported that. Anything else from board subcommittees? Ruby?
May I ask a clarifying question about this? And this, I think, is actually for Mark. I feel like in the course of some meeting that I had or something related to what I heard from the sheriff's office related to my work, I felt like I wasn't confident that there wasn't some annual cycle of not re-fingerprinting, but some cycle by which annually or every few years, people who are already fingerprinted in the system get re-established or re-upped. And
every year is an annual. That's exactly what Mark just referred to.
Okay, so I guess, so what you're saying is every year at each school, so I'm fingerprinted.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to go to my local school's office and say, do something?
No.
Okay.
If you're already fingerprinted, you don't need to get fingerprinted again, but you do need to fill out the annual background check.
Okay.
That goes to the registry.
Yeah, it's a level one background check every 12 months.
Okay,
right.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, good, thank you. Hannah?
I just add, as a parent, I've seen Julianne's email. It would be great if that was just sent to all leaders so we could always send out the exact same thing.
Yeah, thank you. I think, yeah, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because it would be nice, just as a reminder to every school to,
Right.
it's,
And it has contact, it's great.
yeah, it's
Easy to use.
yes, well laid out. Okay, any other updates on subcommittees? Okay, moving right along. Can I do that? Press the issue? Yes, we are up to letter D, which is the review of the continuous improvement plan as presented September 10 at the summit. Open for discussion. Tim.
So, Act 46 of 2015 of the Agency of Education is pretty clear and unequivocal in stating that school boards determine district-wide goals. I don't think anybody in this room would think that a school board should unilaterally do that. Principals, the curriculum and assessment office should take the lead on this. But our policy and the Agency of Education also calls for collaboration. And we've discussed the goals in the retreat and at the last summit meeting. But to me, there's never been an opportunity to really deliberate on each of the goals that were presented to us. We haven't had the chance to see, this is the goal for graduation rates. Let's discuss. Can we modify it? We just haven't really discussed it in depth. I was thinking about some goals that might be considered. For example, reducing chronic absenteeism, improving the academic performance and graduation rates of students on IEPs. We know that students on IEPs are not performing to state levels per the scores. We know that special ed students are graduating at a 58% rate, which is far below that of the 71% state average. So these are the kinds of things that had the board been asked, these are our goals, do you have any others that you might suggest? Or would you modify these in any way? Or would you delete them? We haven't gotten to that discussion. We just heard powerful statements about student safety and health. Quite a question that begs is, why don't we have a specific goal for the district to improve student health and safety as measured by, you tell us, incident rates. There's various ways of measuring that. We talked about race, and one of the community members pointed out that we do have on July 1st, 2020, the SD and the SU made a commitment to social justice and anti-racism. The question begs, why haven't we got a goal specific to meeting the 8 points in the continuous in the social justice and anti-racism commitment, which calls for, by the way, it says the plan included a commitment to hold ourselves accountable to at least annually taking an organizational inventory of how we're doing in meeting the commitments and taking corrective action. This doesn't mean just presenting what we're doing, but it really means measuring what progress is this district making year after year to reduce, to promote anti-racism and to promote social justice. I think after tonight, at least before we consider voting on district-wide goals, we need to come back and really seriously deliberate on goals that haven't been yet discussed by the board. That's why if we do have a vote on the continuous improvement plan, I would urge board members to hold off until we have a chance to discuss other goals that other board members might have, to discuss at least a couple of these that might be added, particularly social justice and anti-racism. That's all I have to say.
I think I heard you begin by saying that some of the goals that were presented at the summit, that we didn't have a chance to discuss them. I believe we did have a chance to discuss them. I believe that when they were presented, there was time to respond, to ask questions. That's what I recall as I think about that experience. So I just want to say that I had a different experience. I appreciate that. Am I saying that incorrectly?
Are you referring to the retreat or to the summit?
I was referring to the summit.
Okay.
Were you referring to the summit or to the retreat?
No, the summit, we were presented for an hour and 45 minutes. Presentations, terrific presentations, informative presentations, very well done. And questions and comments were held off until the end. By then, it had been 2 hours into the meeting. I don't think we had time to really deliberate on what was on that massive amount of information that was presented to us.
I recall the experience very differently.
Okay.
And I recall that that evening ended at 8:38. I have that imprinted in me. I know when it ended. And it began with a particularly long period of public comment. And so the public comment period lasted for 45 minutes. So I think the presentation was concise and with considerable time for questions and discussion. Matt?
I had a colleague that once said, when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. When I think about the foundational purpose of public schooling, I find that the goals submitted, continuous improvement plan goals of increasing literacy, math, graduation, and a sense of well-being, those 3 goals, I think, are central to the work of public schools. If I recall, Superintendent Spino indicated that these goals were not to exclude other goals, and that each school, if I remember correctly, each school could add on and modify goals as they saw fit for their particular school. So I find myself very much in agreement with the continuous improvement plan goals as set forth. And I'd like to take the opportunity to challenge leadership councils to identify additional goals that they think would be best suited for their schools, including some of the things that Councilmember Tim has brought up, and challenge our schools to go beyond. Let's not let these CIP goals be the ceiling. Let's let them be the basement and go further than that.
I want to express a concern of too many goals. I think that organizations function best when goals are contained and we can track them. I do think that some of the issues that were just raised by you are embedded in some of these goals. For example, support more students graduating from our system. Well, we do that if we put increased emphasis on reducing chronic absenteeism. If we begin to tackle that, then we're increasing the graduation rate. So I think there is a melding that does exist between some of the goals that you just mentioned and what was presented. Eva had her hand up first.
Oh,
yes.
I don't know if somebody else.
You had your hand up first.
Okay.
Would you? Yes.
So, thank you, Tim, for sharing that. What stood out for me was the IEP and the graduation rate. And I know that we do have a goal in general for graduation rates, but this 56% did stand out to me. And my question is how is that included? Also the academic performance of IEPs. Because we also know that a lot of people of color, marginalized people, poor people, really people who are struggling are on IEPs. So for me, being able to separate that and give them a little bit more special attention, now that stands out to me, and that seems significant.
Yeah, I agree.
Happy to speak to that a little bit. I don't know if we'll answer your question entirely, but that was one thing that we really wanted to center in developing this CIP in relation to last year's CIP. So the goals in math and reading, well, we didn't meet that 10%, and so we wanted to keep that piece of it. The component that we added was while reducing our achievement gap, and what that's talking about specifically is kids who are on IEPs, kids who are in marginalized communities, that we're tracking their performance specifically, and that we don't want to see, maybe the whole of everybody is going up, but these groups are not changing their performance. That's a problem, and a problem that we noted in our data that was happening. And so the goals that we wrote this year were specifically around reducing that achievement and that opportunity gap that exists. So we want to see that improvement for our kids who are on IEPs and math and reading as well. So while the goal doesn't say for kids who are on IEPs, I think because that almost like pigeonholes us a little bit too much. It's not just kids who are on IEPs that are underperforming in our district. And so that allows us to look at multiple groups of kids who, we're concerned about based on their data.
Can I ask one follow-up question? And I'm so thankful that you shared that information. How do I engage that conversation with you in the future? Like, as far as like tracking, can I ask how the IEP students doing when you're talking about graduation rate?
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe.
And our next summit is scheduled for February, which is essentially to review September and look at the current data of where we are in terms of how we've performed from September to February. And we can disaggregate that data as well at that time. So that would be another formal opportunity to have that discussion with the board.
I think as a board, we should start jotting down these questions that we have so that we hold on to them, we don't forget them, and we can pass them along before that February summit so that these questions are specifically addressed.
Also, do you mind?
Not at all.
It made me think about that, those 4 pages of like action items that I passed out that were so much language on those slides. I don't know if you recall, but it's like there's the goals, but then there's all these action items and how we're going to measure them. And honestly, I think that is so much of the heart of our CIP, and that really does talk about, more specifics around SEL implementation and what was I just looking at?
Is this
centering?
Yes.
Centering like equity and social justice across the curriculum, and talks about like what are the measures that we're going to use to address those specific action items. And so I think, while it's certainly not perfect, I do think a lot of the concerns that you have, Tim, might be embedded in the specific action items. And one thing that we wanted to do, that we decided to do as a team this year, is to make sure that for each of those specific action items, there's a steward of those who's kind of keeping track of that over the course of the year. And we'll be reporting out on those in February.
Ruby.
I wanted to kind of add weight and underscore things that Matt said. I agree with. Thank you for so eloquently saying what you said. But I also want to kind of come back to something I heard Tim say that I think is important, and there's a way in which I have felt satisfied by this CIP process to a large degree. Like the last presentation was really, very informative. I feel informed. I feel like there's a process for continuing to stay informed. I'm happy about that. When I look back at the process, I think we made improvements from the prior year in terms of the process and how that proceeded. But I think we've acknowledged that there is a way in which the sequencing, I don't know that we're all in alignment about when things should have happened and how they happened in this past year. That's not to look back and say, let's not do something, but it's just being realistic about what happened. I think we, as board members and the superintendent, there are a number of us who are going to the VSA conference. And I think that's an opportunity for those board members to strategically reach out to other board chairs and board members to say, hey, how do you set your goals? What's your process? And if there's a question, like I have a question about timing. I have a question about who initiates. So I can say, who initiates it? What's the timing? And I can ask that pointed question of my peers and we can bring that back, so that we can be self-reflective. And so it may be helpful to us when we talk about that board self-evaluation, because the work that we are talking about with the CIP, that's coming from, the core of that work is coming from the administratorship. And as Tim mentioned, it would be, lunacy not to have, the administrators leading the conversation. It would just be crazy. So it's, great that we're seeing that. But when we look at policy or the statute, when we look at the statute, it is very clear that the board, sets the goals for the district. So how do we hold that responsibility and move forward in the way that we're doing it? I think looking to some of our other districts in the state would be a good idea.
Thank you.
Just on what Matt was saying earlier about leadership teams and how CIP goals are developed in schools. And I guess as a new administrator, I'm quasi-asking, quasi-sharing that in the 4 years I've been at BUHS, they have not had specific CIP goals for the building. So this year we developed our own CIP goals and we based them off of the district CIP goals. And so those have been shared at all staff meetings or on the newsletter I send out every week. So I guess the question I'm posing is, how does that get shared, and is that part of those meetings with our leadership council teams? I don't know. I'm asking a question.
I realize that, and I realize you're also looking at me.
You did say direct everything to, no.
No, that was really good. No, wait a minute, please.
You asked for it, Deborah.
No, we've gone beyond that, Hannah Parker. Thank you very much. I don't know whether that's a rhetorical question at this moment or not, but I think it's a very real issue. Yes.
Yeah, my initial reaction would be to utilize your leadership council as a significant stakeholder in sharing the process that BUHS goes about in developing their specific CIP, and then provide updates throughout the school year.
I think just I remember sitting in awe of that meeting in the spring when you presented, Julianne, the CIP goals. And to the leadership council, and they were very specific to Dummerston School site. So I think we are. There's so many things that are new to us. I think we're a merged district, recently merged. We've got leadership councils as a result of Act 15, and we're finding our way through this process. Tim,
2 points. First, the high school, as I understand it, is going through the self-study for the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, NEASC. So that would generate at least a 10-year strategic, areas for improvement and areas to build on, correct?
It's 3 years, and that's what we're in right now. And so we also have those goals. We have 2 sets of goals that we're working on right now.
Yeah, so that would be an opportunity to really, for the high school, to share with the community what the high school is aiming to improve. But my other point is, when you have a goal that's embedded in a larger goal, well, almost by definition, it just doesn't get the attention that the goal, that a strategic goal has. A strategic plan also represents, it represents the values of the community and the board. And I think you heard tonight that this community and this board values social justice and anti-racism. And we made that commitment in 2020. And I think that we should really take seriously what we've heard tonight and consider not adding 4 or 5 more goals, but at least elevating social justice and anti-racism to the level of a distinct goal that we set out to measure and to improve. And if you don't measure it, you can't improve it.
Eva.
So I've been chair of the Social Justice Committee, and it's been about a year and a half of meetings. I'd like to say that we have like 20 people in attendance, but it's usually like, maybe a good 5 or 6 people. I think we've tried as hard, like we've done amazing things in regards to like the diversity questions on the resume, board members being able to see resumes, and the diversity questions has been really successful. Our new HR director is fantastic. He's come to meetings and, HBCUs, how do we get more diversity? We've done, we've gone as far as we can. Now we're doing bullying. And I think that having that reflection where we bring all of the board members, because we do have like one presentation, like one big presentation a year, but I think having that evaluation, having that check-in seems really collaborative, right? We like to use that word. It seems really collaborative, and I think having that check-in, like where are we at? What are we doing with social justice? What's going on? Not to say like, oh, you have to do X, Y, and Z, but like what's going on in this here or that school, and just having that conversation, given what has happened tonight. And I did ask that question at the last meeting. Where do we go from here? Like I feel like that would be a nice turning of the page.
I think assigning measurements to the issue of social justice and anti-racism is a really difficult task. I think we can measure it in bits, such as hiring practices, such as teacher retention, such as it's come up with the HR director in terms of bullying. And certainly at a recent SU meeting, I raised the issue of bullying, and it's got a very precise definition. So then you've got that other issue of microaggressions that doesn't fit into the definition of bullying, right? And yet that, in terms of living with that experience day after day, those hits, that's bullying in terms of how it resonates in the individual. So trying to figure out what those measurements are, what's reported, because we can have these wonderful discussions about professional development and workshops, but that's not measurement. I don't think. I'm just looking around the room for questions. Tim.
The commitment that we made in 2020 has 8 elements to demonstrate progress or not. So before we dismiss this or approve it or adopt it, I would encourage everybody to read the commitment. It's a good document that was done very collaboratively.
During the pandemic.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. So in terms of bringing this conversation to a close, how do you feel as a board about approving the continuous improvement plan? Action is required. Yes, I did something wrong.
No.
Oh, okay. I thought.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the continuous improvement plan goals as set forth by Superintendent Spino.
Second.
Discussion. Well, in the discussion phase, I would like to suggest that in following through on the motion, there's the understanding that the issues that have been put forth this evening be addressed as we move through the year. And we move through the year with the continuous improvement plan as it exists, in keeping with the motion, but the understanding that there are corollary issues that have to be supported and measured in order for these 3 goals to actually be measured and sustained. I'm not changing the motion.
I just have to say that I just don't feel that we're ready to adopt it until we hear very specifically from the administration how other goals might be incorporated into the strategic plan.
Other discussion? Ruby.
I guess I just wanted to bring into the conversation what my recollection was that this CIP continuous improvement plan is a living document, and it's something that is not meant to be a static thing. And I think that that's not to dismiss at all the concerns that are being raised. It implies that there's like work and that we can't lose sight. If we have, if we want to know about the achievement, gaps with IEP stuff, we need to keep that in our minds so that we can ask, in addition, if we expect certain things to come, we want this data to come back and we're not seeing it, we need to ask for it. So that's work on our part, and that, so that, I don't think that approving the goals as they're set forth in any way implies that we don't have a lot of work to do. So from my perspective, I'm in support of the motion.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I think that the acknowledgement of approving the CIP gives recognition to all the work by all the administrators that they put into this. And as Ruby just said, it's a living document. So I think by passing it, we're saying, thank you for doing all this work from the administrative point of view. So, and that's very important.
Any other discussion? Anne?
Query, in light of the fact that this is specified and required by the state of Vermont, is there a deadline?
Yeah, I can respond to that. When we had the June 18th summit, presented the goals, brainstormed goals, looked at the action items, voted on those action items, and had that version of the CIP to bring forward. That was submitted to the state by the end of June, and it was approved as the first draft. So the state has accepted the CIP as a continuous improvement plan as we go forward. And we continue that cycle as presented every year.
Thank you. So I guess I'm going to ask the same question. So what was submitted to the state for approval and approved is actually the document, the 3 goals. Got it. Thank you. Right. So any other discussion? All right, I think the motion is to approve the CIP, the Continuous Improvement Plan as presented at the summit, September 10, 2024. That is the motion. I think we're about to bring it to a vote. All those in favor? I'm going to do a roll vote. We might as well just do that. Okay, so this is approval of the CIP as presented at the summit. Anne?
Aye.
Tim?
Nay.
Ruby?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Eva?
Aye.
Kim?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Okay, Colleen? Okay, Matt?
Aye.
Okay, Deborah? Aye. Thank you. And the issues will continue. Thank you very, very much for the hard work in going from the planning stages for the summit, for the admin board retreat, June 18th. That activity itself and pulling it together, and then all of the planning meetings that we had to pull together the summit. And that was collaborative in a way that did not take place the prior year. And pulling together this plan, as well as this conversation, and knowing that there is more to do.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you very much. The CIP is approved.
Thank you for those kind words. That were
Yes, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay, we already had a break, so we're continuing, okay? Thank you very much. Okay, so there's an update regarding the Panorama Task Force. Ruby?
Well, I thank you for turning to me, but I happen to be a board member who is part of a task force, but I believe that Bryn Tucker would be the appropriate person to lead the conversation.
Maybe I'm kind of awkwardly the director. I got here at 6:04 and it was tight seating already tonight. I apologize. We had a task force meet twice, once in late August and once on September 11th, to look at some of the instruments that we're using to help inform our sense of belonging goal for our CIP. The first meeting consisted of some central office staff as well as 2 school administrators and a counselor from one of our schools. The first question that we really looked at was the frequency of administration of the climate survey, the student climate survey that's taken by 3rd through 12th graders in the district. And we had a lot of rich conversation about that in terms of timeline and capacity for staff to use those data to then make changes, and how much lead time is needed for planning, and what are different data pools that are available for normed reference to be able to look at those data. That conversation continued at our second meeting, unfortunately, because it was September 11th and school is now in session. It was mostly just central office staff, I believe, with our board reps at that time. What the committee decided on is that we would have a fall and a spring administration of the student climate survey for this year, with the addition of an open-ended question that would say to students, what are 1 to 2 things your school could do to help me feel more safe? So this climate survey timeline will be incorporated into our local common assessment plan that's presented to all of our schools via the curriculum and assessment toolkit. It will be on the October 11th admin meeting agenda, where we can look at that as a team to determine the best timeline and information communication about rollout to increase participation rates. So that was the first recommendation of that committee. Additionally, we decided to administer the teacher perception of student survey also in the fall, ideally prior to November conferences with families, in an effort to take a look at those data to also help teachers reflect on students in their classrooms, the efforts of their first 6 weeks of school, and to potentially inform core social emotional work that can happen in the classrooms. We had some conversation about ideal questions for that survey and decided to put that out to our teaching staff to give input on what questions are actually most helpful for them to reflect some of that information. So a survey was developed and shared at the round of grade level meetings that were just continued kindergarten through 8th grade last week. That survey will also go to all teachers in all schools on October 1st, so anyone can weigh in on the top questions. There are already some leading trends that have come up. And there will be a simultaneous administration of teachers taking the survey and students taking the survey late this October. Obviously, we'll share all that information back to the board. Next steps for the task force are also to take a look at later this winter, the family survey that's administered also later in the winter, early spring, and to consider incorporating a teacher retention survey. So taking a look at those questions. So that's kind of like deeper, further work. So that is where the committee landed. I think incorporating those into our local assessment plan is aligned with policy F22, which is about student assessment. Obviously, we don't just assess academics, we assess how students and families and teachers are feeling about the system. So that is where the task force landed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anything further regarding this? Ruby?
I had a few things to say. I think that it was really meaningful as a board member participating in the task force. It was really meaningful to collaborate in the ways that we have, and I really appreciate that. I think that my involvement on this and my desire to be involved in this really came from over the last year. About a year ago, we as a board took this issue up of frequency, amongst ourselves. We talked about what, there was a motion at that time to ask the district to shift to 2 times a year in terms of administering the climate survey. And that motion was voted down. And really, I think the work that's happened between last year and now, and the work on the task force particularly, is really instrumental in the shift that's happened. I feel that it's important from the perspective of anyone watching in our community and looking at the work of this board to understand that we as a board do support, particularly that, to me, the frequency and the shift from once a year to twice a year is not a small shift. And it's a meaningful shift. And so I don't necessarily think there's entirely alignment about whether or not it is needed for our board to have a motion to acknowledge this, the local assessment plan changes that have just been outlined. But I personally think that it would be appropriate for this board to do that. So I move that the WSESD board acknowledge the adjustments to the local assessment plan as outlined by Bryn Tucker, including the decision to administer the student climate survey in the fall and spring.
Can you read that again, please?
I can email it to you.
Okay, that'd be good. I just want to make sure I got it right.
Second. Discussion?
Yeah, I have a question, really. I think that the question that came up a long time ago was to do the Panorama survey twice a year, and that was defeated. So I think there's a difference between the climate survey that was mentioned by Bryn and the Panorama.
Yeah, I can speak to that if that's helpful. I think my understanding is that we are talking about the same survey as the Panorama climate survey. So it is the same survey. I think I wanted to be clear that part of what the task force talked about is we went back and forth on should we do it twice or should we do it once, was we were gonna try it out for this year and see what kind of information we got and how helpful that was to move and support our school systems. And just like we do with all of our assessments, there are several academic assessments in our local assessment system this year that we decided to discontinue because they weren't as helpful for us, and we added some new ones because we thought they would give us better information. So my understanding of the conversation at the climate survey task force was, or the Panorama task force, was to try it out for this year and see what we got. To be very clear, some challenges with that is it is one norm pool that Panorama company pulls all of the data into. So it's not like, if I'm a third grade reader and I'm expected to read at this level in the fall and then continue increasing my proficiency and know that now the standard is at this level in the spring. And so there are different kind of pools of data that help me know if I am on target to do that or not. It helps me identify the percentile at which I'm at. Just to be clear, Panorama does not norm their data in that way. They take all of the data from all of the schools, no matter when students take the survey, and kind of dump it into one pool. So it's a little less responsive in our ability, giving it multiple times a year, to really be able to say, well, we were at the 40th percentile and now we're at the 45th percentile or whatever, for example. But because there was strong opinion about that, and I remember being at the first meeting and even one of the members from the school was saying, I'm really thinking about this differently now, listening to the conversation at the table. This kind of makes sense. Let's consider trying it out. So yes, it is the same survey. It's the Panorama Climate Survey, and the conversation coming to this collaborative group was, all right, well, let's see what it gives us. Let's see how it helps us run our schools.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Tim?
Just to clarify for all the board members, there are three actual surveys. One is the Student Climate Survey, which talks about student climate. The other is extremely important for the goals, of course, and that's a sense of belonging. 5 questions addressing a sense of belonging. And the third are custom questions, which this district has used for the last 15 years. And then there will be, as Brenda mentioned, open-ended questions. And I'm hoping that the students can get involved in deciding maybe 1 or 2 other open-ended questions for the survey. Yeah, it was a useful, good conversations in the task force. We also talked about the possibility of adding other surveys. The 3 surveys I mentioned compose 16 questions, which are done very quickly, less than 5 minutes at the high school level. Adding a survey on health and safety, for example, that Panorama offers would not be much of an imposition, or adding questions on classroom engagement, which I presented at a previous board member. These are other surveys that I hope will be considered to be added.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to go back to the motion that's before us, very specifically.
Yeah.
Eva.
Oh, I just wanted to just say that I was part of the task force, and it was great. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and it felt really collaborative, and I feel like the group just saying we're going to try this and see what happens, I felt like was a breakthrough. And I was, I'll be honest, I texted my elder board and I'm like, yes! So I was really happy. And and we'll see what happens with that information. So I'm just really grateful to have been a part of it. And I'm excited to see what the information presents itself.
Okay. Any other discussion about the motion before us? I think we're ready to vote. Do we need to hear that motion back? So, do you have it in front of you?
Sure. I move that the WSESD board acknowledge the adjustments to the local assessment plan as outlined by Bryn Tucker, including a decision to administer the student climate survey in the fall and spring.
Okay, all those in favor? please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes. Thank you very much. Great. Okay.
May I, just one point of clarity around the task force. From my perspective, the task force that I was involved in was a board, driven task force that looped in the administration, and it was a collaborative effort. Moving forward, the work I feel like is appropriately no longer a board-centered task force, and so there is continued work that the assessment team needs to do, and I presume that they will draw in anyone that they need, and I think that it would be great if board members continue to be involved. I don't know that I need to be that board member, but I think that it's great to have board voice. But so I just wanted to publicly kind of say that in terms of clarity around our process.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. F and G, as I said at the beginning, have moved to October 8th. Thank you. H is other business. Moving on. May I? Other business, yes, thank you. We are up to the administrative report. Can I just say we received today the breakdown of the 2%.
Got our copies too.
Oh, yes. I'm wondering if we need to discuss this evening. If we could hold off on this, or should we, what say you, Mark?
I think Frank was prepared to discuss that with us tonight.
Oh, is he here?
He's still here.
Oh, I'm sorry, sorry, I didn't see him in the space, so I was about to skip over this altogether. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm glad to speak to it. Are we ready to proceed?
Yes, we are. Thank you, Frank.
Okay. So what we have is, Mark, I don't know if you had a chance to do the handout.
Yeah, it's going around the table right now.
All righty. And I'm not sure who our Zoom.
That would be me.
Yeah, if you want to let me share the screen, I can share the document as well.
Doing this wrong. Where are his permissions? I'm not finding them.
Okay. Well, I can just proceed.
Sorry, I'm getting tired.
Do you think you
Oh, damn, yeah, it's beginning of another day.
Hold on.
Tomorrow.
That's okay. It's not right. Here.
And we can proceed with just the paper copy if you're not sure.
I'm making a progress.
Yeah, that should get on the share the screen.
Frank, your co-host now. Try it now.
Righty, here we go. Nice. Did it come up? Or I have to hit more buttons, maybe? Oh, gee. I've hit share, but
Now you can.
are you seeing it?
No, try it again. Stop and try it again.
All righty. There we go. Share screen. Okay. How's that?
There you're coming up, Frank. There you're coming up, Frank.
Okay.
Yay.
We see it. All right. So folks have this hard copy, and the folks that are on Zoom, this is the document that we are reviewing. So what we're looking at is the document that was described to our electorate back in March. And then as you see at the top of the document there, a little bit of history on after generating the freeze assumptions because of the legislative action in February around Act 127, where they retroactively rescinded the ceiling, the tax increase ceiling, 2 weeks before town meeting. I think we all remember that. Pretty unprecedented action by the legislature, but they removed a 5% cap from a tax increase, which prompted many schools and many communities to fail budgets, to modify budgets. And of course, as you know, we were not immune. We were proactive with our community and proposed a spending freeze in fiscal year 25, which now we're almost through the first quarter. So that's a little bit of background on this. We reviewed this with the electorate on March 19. They passed the budget with this assumption presented, and then we confirmed this again in June with the principals. And do keep in mind, this is all generated from the principals' recommendations to Mark. We presented again the concept to the board on June 25th, and here we are tonight. So what this presents is the assumptions for each school site. And the far right is the dollar amount of the freeze, which totals up to that 800,000 that we had discussed at the March meeting, the annual meeting, and the document provides in the shaded yellow here on the right column the assumptions. So very quickly, you see BAMS. We have a reduction in a full-time equivalent position, along with some supplies. The high school, you see a reduction in staff. Generally, all of these FTEs are associated with either a voluntary request for a reduction, or it's removing a to be hired that was never recruited. So the high school voluntary reduction, and then we had a vacancy where we didn't fill a vacancy, along with some capital that fortunately we're able to complete in the prior year for the high school. Guilford, you see 2 part-time positions reduced based on really principal feeling that many of the goals that were in place have achieved their result, and we are supporting students with the balance of our budget as presented. Academy, you see to be hired position and a para position that was vacant, not renewed. And then Dummerston, again, change in staffing based on, I believe, a retirement in Dummerston, and then restructuring the position. Career Center, a curricular assignment, and then Green Street, a reduction in the foreign language, again, based on a retirement. And in Putney, primarily capital and supplies, and Oak Grove, reduction in staffing there. Some of the other statistics here, just from a equity point of view, we're always very mindful of that. So you see the statistics, first column of data on the left here showing our staff at the site, the full-time equivalent, that's what FTE means. It's adding up all full-time people plus any part-time people, and so it's always apples to apples. We see enrollment in those schools. These are statistics that we had estimated back in February, March. The student per employee is a simple ratio that it's getting more and more discussion at the legislative level, primarily because Vermont is known as a rural state to have a very low ratio of students per employee. And that is actually how this data is sorted. So the high school and BAMS being the larger schools, of course, typically you would expect the larger systems to have a higher utilization of staff when it comes to number of students per employee. And then we see at the bottom, Oak Grove is on the lower, but this is sorted on that scale. There is also a correlation with poverty indicator. So that's the AOE direct certified percent data. That refers to the AOE providing us with data from the state indicating the percentage of our student population that are receiving some sort of support associated with their socioeconomic circumstances. So those are absolutely important factors, but ultimately it was the judgment of the principal and then Mark accepting that rationale for the freeze. This is in the context of, you may remember, assuming that we will be applying 1.2 million in our fund balance against fiscal year 25's tax liability, along with identifying $350,000 in additional revenues. This is all what we presented at the annual meeting, along with $600,000 of reserves associated with some of the benefit programs that we've accumulated over the last 5 years. So I think that was the impression I had folks were interested in, and we, as I say, have just confirmed these assumptions again with the principals, knowing that circumstances change over the course of the year.
Thank you.
Any questions? Matt?
Thank you, Frank. As we consider budgetary requirements for high quality education and the taxpayer base in our district, in our region, Frank, I'm wondering if you could advise the board about, as we look to build the budget, say we did go with, or we changed, for next year's budget, we reduced it by $1 million, basically this 2%. What outcome would that have on property taxes in our region? Would it move the needle at all?
Yeah, there is a pretty direct correlation between once the state indices are set, correlation between the spending proposal and tax rates. So it would be pretty much a through line, meaning if you reduce the budget by 2%, given the same real estate indices and state indices that are set by the legislature, which, as you know, we have no control over, there would be this correlated 2% reduction in tax liability. But as you know, the state's indices have been extremely volatile, and that is why we're having the sort of unprecedented presentation at the annual meeting to say hey, the legislature changed the rules after we had already published our budgets. Now we've got to respond to be fiscally responsible. And fortunately, we were able to estimate the most important statistic that the state set in June. We were able to estimate the yield number within 99.9% of what ultimately it was set. But so there, that's it, man. It's we certainly can say, hey, if everything remains the same on the status side regarding real estate and the yield, then we can project an impact as a result of school board budget approval and assumptions. But it's been very difficult to estimate in January or February what the legislature is going to do in June. Fortunately, we've been able to do that with a high degree of accuracy over the years.
Thank you. Sure. I have a question for you, Frank, just to make sure I'm correct, and it relates to the question that Matt just had. I'm looking at the annual report, and as was printed in the annual report, the tax rate would have been 1.594, and after everything was done, after the $3 million in revenue was added, which included this 2% freeze and the other things that Frank just mentioned, then the tax rate went down to 1.502. So it would mean on a $100,000 house, you'd either pay $1,594 or $1,502. So that is the implication that the reduction made directly to the tax base.
Right. Yeah.
Sean, could you just say those numbers again? I want to get those in the minutes.
Well, yeah, it's in the annual report as printed, which was after they rescinded the 5% cap, which enabled us to do what we did originally. So that was 1.594. And then after the revenue increase by 3 million with that Frank has just referred to, the final tax, and I don't have it right in front of me, but if, by memory, Frank will correct me if I'm wrong, it's 1.502.
That's right. Sean, you're correct. And that is, of course, the school board's presentation to the public, a equalized school homestead property tax rate.
Yes.
But unfortunately, that gets scooped up by the real estate market and adjusted based on the CLAs in each individual town. And that's where we know it's created all kinds of confusion and volatility.
Yeah, but it's so important to look at what our tax rate unified was, and that's all that the district really has, that's all that this board has control over, is what the unified tax rate was. And as Frank just mentioned, the CLA, it's so volatile, like in Putney, their CLA was so high, 1.109, I think. So their tax rate in Putney was 1.333, lowest tax rate that anybody's ever heard about.
355.
1.355?
Yeah.
Okay, so that, I mean, that's a historically extremely low tax rate, and yet there was a lot of outcry by the public because you're paying on the higher assessed value, which occurred during the reassessment. So it doesn't, what it all comes back to is what Frank mentioned, that the board and the school district does not have power to change those things. And the board did have the power and the administration to add the $3 million to revenue, which gave us a reasonable tax rate, lower than it has been for the past 3 years. So that it just shows, I don't think it's very well understood. And I think that it's so important to look at the numbers and just realize that's what happened, which is favorable because of the things that Frank just mentioned, because of the page that Frank, the 2% and the other 3 things that came to $1 million, which is added revenue, which lowers the tax rate.
Ruby.
I am, just appreciating that this document that you're sharing, Frank, is really a distillation of a considerable amount of work on the parts of the principals at each location. So I'm kind of appreciative of that, and also see this as like my chance to glean information and ask questions. So I have two kind of questions / comments. One is related to the WRCC, and it could be that it's just wording and I'm just reading it incorrectly, but I'm confused as to, it looks to me like the 0.5 FTE math position assigned to BUHS, that's the entirety of the reduction. Does that mean that amount, rather than being assigned to WRCC, was reassigned to or was in the BUHS budget? Or is it just referring to that, something that was assigned to BUHS and it was like paused and not included in the budget?
I can answer that, but if Nancy Weiss is still there. She's left, okay. Yeah, Nancy has been working through a number of curricular changes to, number one, is respond to student interest in various skills, career center technical skills. The math teacher position has been changed from what was a shared position with the aviation program that's been very successful, but just getting established. It's the same teacher, and so really there's been a reassignment of the curriculum that's being offered and who teaches it. And then is Hannah still there?
I am.
Yeah. So Hannah, I don't know if you have the insight on the math department and to what extent within the math department an employee is being shared with the career center, but that's what Nancy has represented. She's also said that this ultimately might not be the full source of the 52,000 or 53,000 that she needs to sustain for this collective effort. So if Nancy was here, she'd fill you in on other contingencies that she's working through. But that was the rationale shared when we went to print. Anything to add, Hannah, on that?
I believe that the aviation teacher was the 50% math teacher, and that is no longer an option at the Career Center. So the BUHS did not absorb any additional staffing with that change. Okay. It's just that we are now supporting all students in math.
Yeah, so it's the way in which math curriculum is accessed, where Nancy is not funding that component, but students have access to the math curriculum through the high school, as Hannah just said.
Okay, that's helpful. And then the only other thing that I note when I look through here is there's it feels to me that the only area that does not have a reduction in workforce is related to Putney in terms of the decisions that were made there, and I think that's important to note, and in large part because I am mindful of the fact that, you know, I see some social worker reductions and some counselor reductions, and I am I'm concerned that as we tighten our belts, that is an area that we've built up that I think is really, really important. And I don't want to tighten our belts so hard in that area that we then are not providing, you know, critical services to our students. And I am not seeing this document and thinking, oh gosh, something's wrong. But I do think that there's, that when I see, when I see the differential between Putney and these other ones, I wonder at how, are there other ways that, you know, that our schools could reevaluate or look at their budgets with an eye not to reduction in workforce, but in, you know, supplies and other things like that. I realize, you know, when we're talking about the high schools, the 2% of the high school is a significant amount versus, you know, a smaller school like Putney. But all that being said, that's just something that I noted when I reviewed the document.
Yeah, and I think to you know, if John's with us, he could speak to the rationale. But as you know, Putney is probably one of the more recent changes at the principalship, and there was a lot of reimagining roles and systems, and as a new principal, John has really only had a brief time to implement and address the need in Putney. So I think we all know he's doing a terrific job, and the student outcomes are very positive. But I would say that's in part a reflection of a transition period. But you also, I'm sure, have noted that the Putney Central School has the next to the lowest, or the student per employee ratio, and that's hard to sustain in an environment that the legislature is creating around penalizing districts for spending more than the state average on a cost per student basis. So cost per student funding formula draws a laser beam attention to student per employee. That's why we have that statistic. It's where all the money is. It's obviously in our employees and benefits. And so I just mentioned that those are statistics Mark and I and the leadership team are very, very aware of, and it requires a very sound rationale from the principal to assure that we are being equitable across all schools.
Matt.
To continue off of what Ruby indicated, particularly when it comes to social, emotional, mental health supports for some of our students, particularly some of our students on IEPs, I might encourage, without trying to open up a can of worms, and I certainly understand the difficulties that go along with it. However, also recognizing there could be some financial benefits, I would encourage administration to continue to consider whether or not it makes sense for the district to explore Success Beyond 6 partnerships to meet those needs. Again, knowing that it's complicated, but it might be able to, if it's the right time, meet that financial need.
Hi Frank, thank you for this this document. One thing that stood out for me was Academy School, the paraeducator position. I'm wondering what the thought process about not hiring a para-educator, because from what I'm hearing from folks, it's a much needed position, especially at our schools in Brattleboro.
Again, is Kelly available tonight? I saw her name on the Zoom at one point. Maybe not.
Left us.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I, as they say, we defer to the principal's judgment, given that they are the educational leader of their school site. Academy does have the most paraeducators employed. You can see when you look at the statistics, there are 66 total employees. And I believe this was a vacant position that in Kelly's assessment of the programs moving ahead, what is working well, that we did not need to fill that vacant position.
Okay. Are we ready to move on? Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Can we get a brief update on safety measures in place at BAMS and BUHS?
Can I ask what you're looking for?
I'm going to defer to Matt on this.
So, if memory serves me correct, there was some discussion regarding potential physical altercations between students in the bathroom in the high school. And we had some discussion about this at a board meeting a while ago. I don't recall exactly when, but I wanted to bring that back to the table for discussion and ask if that was part of administration's planning for this upcoming year. We've talked about safety being important. Just querying the administration about that.
Can I ask if, I don't know if you want to address it this evening or not.
I'm happy to. I just was curious where, it just was a little vague.
Okay, great. Okay.
So I can just share, at the high school, and I know last year I did bring this up. I also talked to Ricky Aether last year about potentially getting an estimate for redoing bathrooms so that they're all single-use stalls with common sink areas, which is what Keene High School just went to because concerns around safety are a thing in bathrooms. I will say this year, I think we've had 0 incidents in the bathroom all around. We have had 0 fights so far this year. 1 fight happened at a football game after hours. And as of this afternoon, we've had a total of 6 vaping violations at the school.
6 what?
Vaping violations. So we have the math bathroom has been an ongoing issue, and we actually had one of our safety officers stationed outside of that bathroom all day, every day. And it just allows for the flow of students to use it appropriately and not be a hangout spot. And I will say right now we have 25 violations inside of the classroom, which is more than double of any other violation in our building, which means kids are in their classes. So I take that as a huge win. And yeah, I think, again, the feedback, as Thea pointed out, has been that the school year has started very strong. People are feeling like kids are engaged, they're in classes, they're learning, they're feeling safe, they're happy, they're smiling, they're all the things. Today I posted pictures of the BUHS hallways during block 3 today, which was in between the 2 lunch periods, and they were empty. I said, yes, we actually are in school today. So I think all in all, it definitely is in a very positive place. I will say that the administrative team is constantly talking about how tired they are, and my response to that is because we're proactively doing the work versus being reactionary. So I think there's a lot of, I also think we're moving far enough away from COVID that people are just figuring out the expectations and how we are in school together.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question. Have you turned on the vaping detectors in the bathroom?
No.
Okay.
Nor would I.
Yeah.
They make a lot of noise and they don't actually detect.
Oh.
They detect like 15 minutes later.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And it's not, I mean, in a high school with 800 students, there's a lot of students going in and out, and you can't. I know that BAMS has a different way of doing it, and it's much simpler because there's less students.
I like your anti-vapor vaping posters in the hallway. It's very nice.
That's all Ricky.
Yeah.
Just building off the vaping, we do have vape detectors, and we were able to have different structures in the middle school. So kids have to take a pass with them from a class and to use the restroom or water, and then they have to hang the pass on the hook outside the bathroom. So that way other kids know it's not open. And so one kid at a time. So if the vape detector's triggered, it's a pretty easy, way to, sorry, I'm tired, so I come out. So, it used to be that if the vape detector went off and 3-4 kids were in there, then it becomes really difficult to say for sure you're the one that was vaping unless we search them. But kids have gotten better at, putting them in certain places where it's hard to detect. So we've, it's still an issue because it's an issue with teens across everywhere, but we've had very few incidents. Actually, where the incident happened this year with the same kids was vaping out at recess, kind of going over on the side of the woods and finding a place to, the vape stuff goes up and it's gotten really fast. So, but we did catch a couple students doing it, so it's not necessarily good, but trying to deal with it when it comes up. And but so that typically keeps a feeling of safety, I think, for the bathroom areas and the hallways. Kids have to travel with passes, and we're constantly kind of monitoring hallway traffic. And we were seeing an increase in discipline around the lunch times. Around noon, our discipline data tend to spike. So kids traveling to and from lunch, and so the teachers are escorting their kids to lunch. So they go as a class when it's lunchtime. They take them as a group. They walk them down. The teacher delivers them to the lunchroom, and then they come back and pick them up from the lunchroom. So we found that reduces, kids are out at recess and they're getting all worked up over a Foursquare game, and then we send them in a big group inside. And so they're still carrying over their game into the hallway, and they're arguing about who won and whatever. And so now we kind of break them up. Okay, if you're going with, this so-and-so, line up here, and then that teacher will come down, pick them up, and they'll take them back to class. So we're pretty structured in a lot of ways. So it's just a very different structure than high school, but feel pretty good about it.
Could you both as administrators kind of circle back to this idea of, there was a lot of talk about kindness in the last year from the students, and maybe Mark can chime in here. I feel like in the current kind of goals, there's a different way that we are kind of invoking that idea of kindness. There's different words that are our priority, but the core of what the focus is on how are we instilling kindness in our communities. So, yes, how are we reducing vaping? How safe are the bathrooms? For sure. But in addition to that, can you speak to the work that you're doing in your schools in terms of instilling this sense of kindness?
I think if students are engaged, you're going to have less issues and a greater sense of belonging. Thinking to what Hannah said earlier, just now, when kids are engaged, they're going to class, they're participating, they're part of the community, you're going to have far less distractions and incidents. So I think focusing everything on student engagement, and this is your school, this is our community, we do this together. That whole type of vocabulary and approach to working with students and families is really positive takeaways.
And I would say a big step the high school took this year is changing our advisory systems. And so and I can't remember if I brought this up in the meeting or not, but it used to be that every advisory met on the first Monday of each week in the afternoon. And advisories were people were just plopped into them when they came to the school. There was no rhyme or reason to it. Last year we decided to make them theme-based. And so every teacher filled out a form, what's a theme you're interested in. All the students filled out a form identifying what theme they were interested in. We made new advisories this summer, so every advisory has 12 students in it, except for the 3 academies, which stayed the same. And they meet every morning between blocks 1 and 2, and they just have 10 minutes to do a quick check-in, do morning announcements, connect with one adult who they feel connected to based on common interests. And that, I think, has been a really positive experience for a majority of our students in terms of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
That found their people.
Okay, thank you. All right. It is, I'm looking at the time, it's 9:30, and we still have a bit of work to do. And so I'm going to say let's see how quickly we can move through the rest of the evening and wind this up. Because we do need to do the executive session. Okay. Frank, it's on you, the fiscal report, the final ESSR report, and tuition forecast with enrollment. I do know that because the next session is the 8th, and key people are going to be away, if we don't cover those issues tonight, it would be delayed until the last session in October. So I guess we have to do it tonight.
I think Frank can be brief on this.
Yes, quite.
Oh, happy to be brief. Yes. Yes. So regarding ESSR spending, I did review ESSR spending on the August 27th board meeting. In a somewhat general term, we'll keep it brief again this evening because of the hour. Windham Southeast School District had planned on dispersing $2.3 million in ESSR funding for fiscal year 24 that we just wrapped up. We did hit our plan and dispersed 100% of the projects. 40% of that was capital improvements. 60% was salary and benefits. So again, 2.3 million, 40%, about 965,000 was capital. And then the balance, 60% was salary and benefits. Another sort of general overview, 25% of the funding, the total amount, 2.3 million, was on direct instruction. So that's primarily academic support positions. Another 23%, 550,000 approximately, were student support services. So that's the nursing and additional direct student support. And then 12% of that 2.3 million, or 279,000, was staff support services. So that's an overview of fiscal year 24. Fiscal year 25, we are just about through the first quarter. You may recall we reported that the ESSR deadline for obligating all funds is September 30th, next week. As of today, we have dispersed all ESSR funds in this fiscal year. There are no more ESSR funds to disperse. We've dispersed $523,000. And as you probably recall, that's primarily contributing toward the Oak Grove heat pump renewable energy system that is well underway, and it is operational at this point. So if you look back all 3 years of the what's called ARP ESSR 3, the Windham Southeast Supervisory Union was awarded $9.5 million. And that's for all three entities, the SU, Vernon, and Windham Southeast School District. And we have dispersed 100% of that as of today. So there's my brief ESSR report.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you. Moving on to tuition forecast with enrollment.
Yeah, so this is a little bit early to be forecasting tuition, but it is typical that we certainly are looking at the initial enrollment statistics. We generally don't forecast tuition until November, well into this first semester, just because it is not unusual for students to arrive late, in terms of enrollment, move-ins from other towns and or exiting. So, but at a super rough back of the envelope type of analysis, we look like we are on track, unlike last year where our tuition estimates were very much below the budgeted historical norm. Overall, in general, total enrollment, again, very preliminary because of just the time of year and the way families often are still making final decisions about public school enrollment. Our initial data, last year we had 2,543 students in our student census. And this year at this point, as of today, we have 2,491. So down a little bit, that's down about 50 students, but very preliminary. And I'm meeting with Paul Smith. Fortunately, he's still supporting us in our systems data analysis and so on, along with Bob Wickberg at the high school and Gary Parzich, our IT director. We are making sure that all kiddos are being accounted for and entered into this power school system, because it's so important that we get the state to recognize our full employment. So, but that's where we are, sort of very much at a glance.
Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you. And apologies for the late hour. I'm glad that you are not with us. The next item, consideration of development of annual budget that reflects multiple scenarios. That is on the agenda as a placeholder, where with the understanding from conversation that issue needs to move over to the Finance Committee. And if that is all right with board members present.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
So I'm saying that it's on the agenda for it to be a public statement on this agenda that we are going to look into developing, that we're going to look into what ifs in terms of the budget, so that in an ideal world we're not just presenting one budget but multiple views for consideration. And it's on this agenda not to deal with it necessarily, but to indicate that it belongs in the domain of the Finance Committee. Is that acceptable to everyone here? Mm-hmm. All right, then, and the understanding of why it's here as a public statement at a full board meeting. Okay, Thank you. I'm going to move on to approval of the consent agenda.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much. Good night.
Yes, you're welcome. Good night.
So approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second, we've got a second. Thank you very much. I've learned my lesson from the last meeting. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. It passes. Regarding new business, I introduced this at the beginning of the board meeting, having to do with October 8 in Springfield, Vermont. We're still in Vermont. From 4 o'clock, I believe, until 7 p.m. It's a meet and greet with Zoe Sanders, the secretary of the AOE. I believe Mark is going, I think Frank is going, probably someone from curriculum and assessment.
Yeah.
And then a couple of board members, yes.
The invitation was specifically to you and I. The one that we got from the VSBA.
I haven't seen it. Oh, do we have that?
Well,
when did we get this?
We got it, Sue Suglowski sent it 12 days ago.
Oh, good grief.
And it's dear supervisor union, supervisor district board chairs. They're inviting us. Space is limited, and they're not inviting the public to this one, but there will be a public one.
Okay, we are invited to that. Okay, that's that takes care of that. I believe you and I are going. Then is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. That raises the whole. Well, we have a board meeting on the 8th. Business as usual. Yes, board meeting on the 8th. It's yours.
Yeah.
Okay, groovy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, great. I didn't realize. Okay, yes.
I don't have the board calendar up. It feels, I mean, are we aware of what is the focus of?
There's not a presentation scheduled for the 8th.
There's not a presentation scheduled?
No. So, and do you want to continue?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I just didn't want there to be something, that was needed, that you people are gonna be needed for.
No,
That's gonna be the fastest meeting ever. There's no admin reports. There's no finance reports.
There's no discussion. Fine. Okay.
And if you warrant, so you're out of there.
That's right. Okay. And a couple of holdovers. Cell phones and, well, student advisory, I feel like I need to be there for that one, but.
You work on that.
Huh?
You can work on what the agenda is with Kim.
Yes,
And
Kim, it's all yours. Okay, have a blast. Okay, great, thank you, but there will be a board meeting on the 8th, and that will take place at Demerston. All right, we are moving, can I move along? Mm-hmm. Yes, I can, okay. Policy and Amendment presents for a second reading F1, Student Conduct and Discipline. Thank you. I think that's it, right? And at this point, there is an executive session, 1 VSA 313, A7, the academic records or suspension or discipline of students. It is a student matter, action anticipated. Is there a motion to find that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All those opposed, nay. Abstentions. It passes. Thank you. I move. Is there a motion to enter into executive session under 1 VSA 313? A7, the academic records or suspension or discipline of students, inviting in Mark Spino and Hannah Parker.
So moved.
Thank you. Discussion? Oh, yes, second. Discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It passes. We are going into executive session at
9:43.
9:43. Thank you. We have risen from executive session at
9:58.
9:58, And we've come back to the board meeting with the following motion. The WSESD board. Is there a motion for the WSESD board to accept the recommendation of the interview committee to nominate one additional student representative to the school board for the academic year 2024-2025?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. It passes. Thank you very much, everyone, for this evening. It is...
Madam Chair.
Yes.
There being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
Any discussion?
Nope.
And all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
We are adjourned at
9:59.